We're good. Okay. All right, so let's see. Officially starting the Community Advisory Committee meeting for AVA Community Energy. Today's Monday, June 10th, 2024. The time is 6:01 p.m. here in Oakland, California, the Lake Merritt Room. Welcome. And Adrian, do you mind doing the roll call?
Yes, thank you. Member Landry.
Present.
Member Hugh. Member Balkasun. Member Weiner. Member Stevenson.
Present.
Member Swaminathan.
Here.
Member Lakshman. Member Pacheco. Member DeFranco. Oh,
Here.
Member Carr.
Yes, here.
Member Harper. Member Lutz. Here. Vice Chair Souza.
Here.
Chair Hernandez.
Present.
And
Yes.
before we begin, I'd like to swear in Member DeFranco.
Yes, please.
Great. Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, Rachel DeFranco,
I, Rachel DeFranco,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution
that I will support and defend the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
Thank you.
Welcome, Member Franco.
Thank you.
Believe you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you for your service to the community, especially AVA Community Energy and then everything else that we need to do to make it a green and renewable future for everyone. Thank you. With that, we have public comment, I believe.
Yes, we have 2 hands raised and 1 in the room. Okay.
Go with the room. Yes, please.
I think it's three minutes?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. I got time this correctly. Okay. Good evening. My name is Brendan Pittman. I'm a resident of Berkeley, and I rise to express my disappointment regarding the CAC's May recommendation to reject nuclear energy allocation. This recommendation was a direct endorsement for the use of unspecified power for the next 5 years, which was a tacit endorsement of dark, non-traceable energy, including coal and natural gas, imported from other Western states. I believe this decision was not in the best interest of Bright Choice customers. In previous years, San Jose Clean Energy and Silicon Valley Clean Energy accepted the nuclear carbon-free allocation. Priced lower than PG&E, their most affordable service plans, Green Source and Green Start, are over 4 and 7 times cleaner in GHG intensity than AVA's Bright Choice plan. Cleaner and more affordable. This is what me and hundreds of thousands of other Bright Choice customers have been denied since 2020. According to the Silicon Valley Clean Energy's own website, accepting nuclear from Diablo Canyon benefits SVCE customers because they are already paying for it, it is a carbon-free resource, and it saves their customers money, to the tune of almost $2 million in 2021. Whether to accept nuclear energy was put before all CCAs in the Bay Area. These 2 organizations made a prudent decision, and their customers benefited. Next, several members' comments on their opposition to nuclear energy were disheartening, yet not surprising. For too long, I've heard opposition points that are not rooted in fact, misleading, and full of emotionalism. Given this rhetoric, and considering many claims will be thrown around at Wednesday's meeting, I find it important to discuss. Nuclear is not clean. According to the IPCC, nuclear energy has among the lowest lifetime equivalent GHG emissions per watt of electricity produced. A recent study by the Breakthrough Institute concluded that the material requirements and mining footprint for nuclear is at or below that of renewable sources. It's not safe and it's close to a fault line. Watt for watt, nuclear is the safest form of energy there is. And look, everything along the California coast is along a fault line. I live mere blocks from the Hayward Fault. The same fault Memorial Stadium sits directly on top. And I don't say this to scare you, but as a means of perspective. All other structures built in seismic hazard areas are meticulously designed and built to withstand massive earthquakes with additional safety factors and redundancies built in along the way. Not convinced? You can visit the plant or read the safety reports. What about the waste? Want to know more about spent nuclear fuel? I'd highly recommend the website What is Nuclear? It discusses the suite of solutions available as well as the current methods of managing spent nuclear fuel in the United States. Spent nuclear fuel is a social problem, not a technical one. A problem that persists because we're default to the lazy position of what about the waste? And then just in conclusion, the majority of this body perpetuated some misleading talking points and opted to use unspecified power for the next 5 years. I hope the board of directors will see differently on Wednesdays and allow me for the opportunity for cleaner and more affordable energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's take online public comment.
Yes. Ryan Pickering, recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Ryan Pickering. I'm a solar installer in Berkeley, California. And I just want to say that, growing up in California, I appreciate this discussion that we're having about nuclear energy. I was pretty anti-Diablo and pretty anti-nuclear in general. And, that's why I worked in solar so that we could transition to clean energy. And in 15 years working in solar energy, it's pretty clear to me that, as I deepen my understanding of how complicated it is to balance our energy grid, we're starting to learn what it looks like to balance solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, natural gas, imports, and nuclear. And we know how to do this as a state. And, I've kind of changed my mind about Diablo Canyon recently. And I think it's okay to reconsider our positions as we learn more. This is a complicated world. And we're all just trying to figure out, how to save it. And I trust the environmentalism and the charter of the CCA system. And so anyways, I'm just saying I appreciate the conversation. I know we're kind of not ready for this yet. This is a little big for Berkeley. And I also wanted to bring it to Ava's attention that there is a petition circulating in Berkeley to amend the nuclear free zone. And that is an idea to double down on our stance against nuclear weapons, but allow for peaceful nuclear sciences to be researched and sourced, and that includes nuclear energy. So if this petition was to be successful, making it onto the ballot and then passing with a majority of Berkeley votes, and that would allow for the city to have a more nuanced perspective about nuclear technologies. So, the president of the United States has called for 200 gigawatts of new nuclear in the United States, new nuclear energy by 2050, including the Secretary of Energy. And whether we build that in California and source it at Ava, it does matter because we are leading by, our example matters, and we got to chip in and do our part. So whether that's supporting other states that decide to pursue this form of clean energy or not, I encourage this conversation to occur because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a lot more conversation. I disagree with the tone of the last speaker. It's okay, and we're all learning together, and we should all be grateful for that. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Timothy Smith, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Hi, this is Timothy Smith. I just wanted to comment on some of the comments that were made last month's meeting all over the Diablo Canyon issue. One is there was a contention that this is nuclear power is not included in SB 100 as an acceptable source. In fact, that is not true. There was a letter specifically from the sponsor of the bill of SB 100 back in 2018 from Kevin DeLeon to the president of the secretary of the California State Senate, indicating that in his judgment, the bill is intended to include all zero carbon sources of energy, including nuclear, to meet the requirements of SB 100, and I think that's been accepted and upheld by the CEC and the CPUC and all the state regulators. I think it's a well accepted fact that nuclear is included in the SB 100 definition of clean energy. And the other thing I wanted to bring up is there was a contention that the plant is on stolen land from indigenous peoples. In a strict sense, that is correct. It is not PG&E though that stole the land, so to speak. It is accepted that the Waititi Nation, that is their ancestral land, it was seized from them under the period of Spanish rule, long before California was even a state in the US. And I want to point out, I don't want to speak for YTT and saying they are in favor of continued operation as an official position, because I do happen to know some people involved in this, but YTT, I think would tell you that they are in negotiations with PG&E in the state of California to determine appropriate compensation for those past acts. And they are not at all hostile to PG&E and in the continued operation. They are looking for their proper ancestral rights, but they are not calling for people to reject this energy or to reject the usage of the plant. And they, I think, probably to the extent there's a financial benefit to keeping the plant open, that gives them leverage to benefit themselves. So I do not think it should be fair to say by accepting this allocation, you are somehow hurting the YTT Nation, because that is not how the YTT Nation feels down in San Luis Obispo.
Thank you. Aya Peters Paz, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Ayla Peters-Paz. I am here representing the local Clean Energy Alliance. I wanted to offer an update from last month's CAC meeting where we discussed the need to offer more expansive and comprehending funding for resilience hubs. And a lot of members of the CAC offered express support of that ask. So as you may know, in the last board meeting, the board asked for a study session on resilience hubs. There was a general desire to learn more about resilience hubs, how they factor into energy resilience and climate resilience. And Jack Balk, who we spoke with last week, wants the CAC to be part of that, of whatever resilience hub programming comes out of the study session, that comes out of funding. So generally, this is a signal in the right direction and there is an optimism and hope in terms of offering more expanded funding. And so again, thank you for supporting this idea. Thank you for offering your support and your interest. In the long term, active support from the CAC would be needed as this resilience hub programming takes shape. But for now, the push that we have, the ask that LCEA has to the board is that in this study session that community groups and community voices be heard. A lot of community organizations have been doing climate programming through resilience hubs for a long time, maybe not under that type of title, but there is a lot of knowledge and history, and that sort of knowledge can be very valuable to the board in learning more about resilience hubs. So generally, that just wanted to keep the CAC updated on where things were going, and just to kind of keep the finger on the pulse of resilience hub programming, possible funding, and then this study session that is going to happen, and that we need community voices in, and that we hope that the CAC can offer support to. So thank you.
Thank you. Local Clean Energy Alliance, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Hi, everyone. This is Jessica Guadalupe Tovar with the East Bay Clean Power Alliance and Local Clean Energy Alliance. First of all, I do want to appreciate the majority vote against taking nuclear energy from PG&E from this body, the Community Advisory Committee. And I want to highlight exactly why and repeat some of the points that Ed Hernandez, the chair of the CAC, made. It was really astonishing to me to see that the board, the Ava Community Energy Board, was about to make a quick decision to potentially take this nuclear energy from PG&E, even though PG&E has not filed an advice letter to the CPUC, and it likely won't be filed until the end of this week. Voting to accept nuclear and/or the large hydro potential offer is premature, considering that this advice letter has not been filed and the full scope of the offer by PG&E on this power is not crystal clear. One of the responsibilities of the CAC and the board is to provide full transparency on all decisions. To rush a decision to take nuclear without having full disclosure on all aspects of taking this energy and how that would impact ratepayers of Ava Community Energy would be just grossly negligent on the part of the agency and the CAC. So I applaud you for your decision. And another thing I want to highlight is that the monetary value that Ava Community Energy staff is floating is all based on estimated assumptions. Again, as a decision-making body, we should be providing full transparency on the pros, the cons, and the opportunity to just say no to either one of these offers from PG&E, because we all know that Pacific Gas and Electric is in the business of making themselves appear better than their own competition, community choice programs, as well as other types of load-serving entities. So I want to thank you once again. And just to reiterate, I am a longtime environmental justice organizer. I've worked with Indigenous communities in the mining and dumping sector of nuclear energy. And I also work with the community that lives by Diablo Canyon in San Luis Obispo. So with that, we need to focus on bringing clean power to the people. And that's clean energy here in our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tom Kelly, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Adrian. For those of you who weren't around when EBCE was founded, I'd just like you to know that one of the reasons why people were so excited about the formation of a community choice program in Alameda County was that we wouldn't have to have nuclear in our mix. At the time, of course, nuclear wasn't an option for EBCE, but the concept or the idea of being able to wean ourselves off of nuclear power was one of the things that motivated those of us who helped to establish the agency actually work towards. So, sure, things change over time, but you should know that the founders of this agency were very glad to be able to avoid having to take nuclear power as part of the electricity mix. Just want to point out on that particular thing is that by accepting nuclear, it just slows down the whole process of moving to renewable and carbon-free energy. And for any of you who haven't heard me say this before, AVA is one of the worst CCAs in Northern California in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, that was one of the primary reasons why we worked so hard and so diligently to form the agency, was to beat PG&E on greenhouse gas emissions. We did that in 2018 and 2019, and then somehow or another that whole thing unraveled, and now we're at the point where we're 6 or 7 times worse than PG&E on GHGs. I just want to point out that PG&E just issued a press release to say that they'll be 100%, they were 100% carbon free in 2023. And, looking at risk management, I mean, if PG&E was to actually push that to the public, there's the potential for customers to flee AVA to PG&E if they're concerned about carbon emissions. And we should be, right? The world's, at serious risk. We're failing. GHGs globally are increasing. AVA produced 1.1 million tons of CO2 in 2022, and they're not getting any better. So I hope you guys will press AVA to, get on board with the GHG reduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
There are no further hands raised at this time.
Thank you, Adrian. In regards to moving to the next item, I think we have the approval of minutes from May 13th, 2024. I believe there might be a comment in the room about a correction. I think from the public. We'll take that now, if that's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can I go? Okay. This comment is with regard to the May 13th, 2024 Community Advisory Committee meeting during the agenda item C9, PG&E Nuclear Allocation, Board Action Item, slides 2030 goal for 100% clean, bright choice service, and the slide details scenario 1, except nuclear allocation. Several board members asked clarifying questions about what is meant and contained by unspecified energy. This question and answer and dialogue by staff, especially the point that most unspecified mix is natural gas and determined by the natural gas as the marginal fuel. I think this should be included in the official written notes because there was quite a bit of dialogue on this and a lot of people asked about it. Unspecified power is an integral part of AVA power content label, and it's getting a lot of attention right now. So I think this exchange should be reflected in the notes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. No worries. Thank you very much for those comments. I'll look to the members if any other comments about the minutes from the meeting of the May 13th. Other comments from the advisory committee? Yeah, Member Landry.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. Do we have the ability to accept the public comment addition?
I think you can restate the comments and we can include those into the minutes if you'd like to summarize them.
Yes, I would like to include that comment that the unspecified did include discussion of natural gas in the unspecified allocation.
And that's for item C9. That was under the
Yes.
PG&E nuclear allocation, the board action item. Any other questions or clarification around that item? Seeing no raised hands, I can take a motion with that adjustment. Member Landry and Member Lutz, second. Okay, first and second. So Member Lutz, Member Landry, first and second. Other comments? Seeing no hands raised, we can do a roll call. Vote.
Great. And there are no hands raised online.
Thank you.
Member Landry,
Yes.
Member Weiner. Member Stevenson,
Yes.
Member Swaminathan,
Yes.
Member DeFranco,
I'll abstain because I was not sworn in yet.
great. Member Carr,
Yes.
Member Lutz,
Yes.
Vice Chair Souza,
Yes.
and Chair Hernandez.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Jumping forward to the CAC Chair report, I have a limited, but I'll look to Vice Chair shortly, Souza, to share more about the last meeting. I think you were there in my place. Before that, they also had, am I right? Yes. Okay, good. There was also the board retreat, talked about the energy makeup composition. I think that happened late last month too.
29th.
The 29th of May, talked more of the full, like 4-hour session about power, energy, and all things AVA. A lot of good information there. So if you want to know the nuts and bolts of AVA Community Energy, that Power Resources Retreat that happened on the 29th has a lot of good content to go through. So you feel free to fast forward, pause, take a break, have some candy, come back, or sugar, caffeine. I think there's a lot of good content there about resource adequacy, the duck curve, and everything that talks about forming the adequacy that's keep the lights on, basically. Member Vice Chair Souza, do you have anything you want to add from the last meeting?
Yes, I was at the last board meeting, and unfortunately, I kind of blew it a little early because I didn't give the notes, our CAC member notes right away. I kind of gave them throughout the meeting. Many people stood up and spoke about everything from the nuclear power allocation to help for folks who are low income with their bills. And the board listened. We did have some input. I mentioned that, all of these people here are asking for help. I know that AVA has given a lot of help, but there's still a lot of people who are underserved. They're in danger of losing or being shut off. AVA does not shut off power, but PG&E will. And many people are in trouble and they can't make their bills. And I think these organizations have made that very clear. I encourage the board to look at that again, even though AVA's trying to help out, but with the budget surplus we've had, that perhaps a second look or even community help, what's been mentioned as far as the resilience hubs, that's been mentioned many times. Small grants for smaller organizations to be able to participate. All of those things have been reiterated over and over, and we still are encouraging that. We're encouraging everybody to have a voice, which is very important. One thing I did during, and I know this isn't part of the staff meeting, it went for 4 hours, so it went on and on. That we're discussing the budget, we're discussing DERMS, all of those things that we discussed here at the CAC meeting. It was similar, and everybody had a similar judgment on that. But one of the things I did over the course of this last month was to look at the leakage from power plants, and every power plant leaks some sort of dangerous chemicals. I looked at several of them. The one thing that really disturbed me was when I looked at the PG&E Diablo Canyon report. It was unreadable when it got to the results. Something had happened. It was like 171 pages of junk. So what I'd like to do is find a way to ask PG&E to fix the report so that we can actually see if that plant is leaking. Because it's disturbing to see that the one nuclear power plant that's in question here the report is garbage. So I'd like to really see what the results of any kind of leakage or dangerous results from the study that is done, I believe every year, and it's watched monthly, and somebody tests it, but there wasn't anything readable, which is disturbing to me. That said, the nuclear allocation was delayed until this month, and it's going to be delayed one more time because we're going to be discussing only budget for this next June on Wednesday.
Thank you, Vice Chair. My apologies, I had a family conflict, so I appreciate the Vice Chair Souza for attending that evening and the 4 hours there of good content, so I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Happy to.
Perfect. Other members, were they present? Also, any other commentary from that evening? Anything else that we want to call out? Anything else that was covered? Just to make sure the conversation. Member Landry, were you there?
Yes, I was there, and I believe that there was discussion about perhaps outsourcing to CBOs or maybe having our RFPs regarding assistance with the PG&E bill. Was that correct, Member Souza? Something to that effect that we might consider pairing up with another organization so that the customers that are behind on their bills could have information on, possibly getting some assistance?
Yes, that was discussed, and it's not, I think it's a few organizations. I know that one of the organizations that I donate to, Catholic Charities, helps out folks. And there's a number of other organizations, but one of the things is actually the knowledge and the getting out the word. So they're there, there's help, and we don't want to see families without power.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member.
Did you join the call that day? Anything? No, thank you. Are there any other comments? So yes, we'll be hearing the nuclear item next month in July. So I think it's been deferred until then. So with that, I have nothing else to report, and we can move forward to the budget.
Hi, I'm going to present on the budget.
Hi, Howard.
Good to see you all virtually. Adrian, if you could pull up the deck, that would be great. And you can jump ahead to slide 3. So let me first just give you a bit of a summary on changes between May and June. So we have reviewed the initial draft budget several times with the Executive Committee, FAP, full board, and the CAC previously. And then we just reviewed it with the Executive Committee last week with an update. So there are some meaningful changes in the June budget update due to an ERA forecast filing from PG&E, which occurred in late May. And what that is a projection, a formal updated filing that shows their expected rates and PCIA for calendar year 2025. And that showed a pretty material reduction in rates and increase in PCIA. That's primarily driven by softening, lowering of energy prices that we've seen between January and April timeframe of this year. So that's good news to customers. Our rates are coming down given our index structure. In terms of our budget update, of course, that does compress our sort of headroom and our budget surplus. And so you'll see some changes here related to value proposition, bill credits, the waterfall, to sort of address it. So with that, let's jump to the next slide, Adrian, slide 4. A lot of these slides you'll recognize from previous presentation. I'll really highlight the changes. So in the bottom left bar chart, the big change is the 2025 bar. So where that bar was closer to in line to the 2024 bar, we're now seeing in 2025 a reduction of rates and an increase in PCIA. Previously, PCIA was near negligible and rates were significantly higher. And so that's, like I said, that's good news for customers. That's a lowering of their energy bills. It does compress our head a little bit. And so that's kind of what that will reflect. So, all right, next slide from there, Adrian. So the next 4 or 5 slides really cover the bulk of the changes. Many of the sort of general overhead, headcount requests, our carbon-free energy procurement targets, our budget to local development, those things are unchanged from our previous version. So I'm really going to speak to the changes that have occurred here. That's related to value proposition, the bill credit, and our waterfall. Those are the 3 big items. And I just sort of set the high level reasons as to why we're seeing the major change. The graph to the bottom right here help to illustrate the exact change that we've seen between the May and the June budgets, and looking at specifically calendar year 24 and 25 rates. So the 2 bars to the left are the 2024 rates. They're not significantly different. That is a difference between what we presented in May, which had the 7% discount to PG&E, and our current value proposition, which is a 5% discount to PG&E. So literally the only difference there is a 5% and a 7% value proposition. So that's what those 2 bars reflect there. The 2 bars to the right are really the meaningful change that we're highlighting here. So that the bar that's second to the right is what we presented in May. So, what that shows there is we did propose a 7% discount to PG&E. And as you can see with the green portion of that bar, that's average rates. And then the blue, which is almost negligible, that was the PCIA. You can see with the bar all the way to the right, that shows the current projection that PG&E has filed in the latest air filing. The green bar comes down significantly, rates are going down, but PCIA goes up. So it is a material reduction overall from about 14 cents to about 13 cents. But you can see a more meaningful impact really to Ava Community Energy. That's the green bar. That's what makes up our revenues. And that's a much more significant drop between the May and the June budgets. The result of that is we are proposing to maintain the value proposition at 5% as opposed to increasing it to 7%. That's what we previously presented in May. We are also proposing that we eliminate the $50 CARE and FARA on bill credit at the outset of the year. That is something that we previously included. We'll definitely have some more detail there to sort of talk about some offsetting factors, fortunately. And then the last piece is an adjustment to the waterfall. We'll obviously reduce the reserve allocation that we're seeing as a result of this. And then we're getting a little creative with waterfall in terms of bill credits and other programs. So that's the sort of the big headline on this slide. I'm going to ask Adrian to actually jump to slide 8. I think that will give a better summary of overall budget scenario, and then we can jump back to the last couple of slides. So the table to the right here obviously shows the high level summary of the budget. The column in orange is our latest update. The column just to the right of that May draft budget, that obviously shows our draft that we presented in May. You can see a pretty significant change, and then and the column all the way to the right is our budget from last fiscal year, the fiscal year that we're in currently, I should say. So you can see that for comparison. So really focusing on the sort of yellow orange highlighted bar here, you can obviously see the electricity sales. So that very top line, that's the really big change we see between May and June. So about $100 million reduction in revenues as a direct reflection of reduction in rates That's all going back to the customers, generally speaking. So that's good news. You know, their costs are going down at the end of the day. You can see in cost of energy, no significant change. And this is because the reason for the reduction in rates in 2025, it's not primarily driven by a reduction in 2025 forecasted energy costs. It's really driven based off of a reduction in 2024 calendar year energy costs. And that does play through in our current budget year, in our current fiscal year. We are sort of overperforming what we had budgeted. I think we've presented that a few times, including the mid-year timeframe where we're seeing a stronger net position there, and that's going to flow into a stronger budget surplus and waterfall. So that's good news. The result of that, though, is an offsetting effect, which is we've over-collected in 2024 a bit because January through April energy prices were lower than we expected. And so we're seeing in 2025 a true up for that, which reduces the rates. So the big change here then at the very bottom is total net revenues or our net position. That's the result of our budget surplus. We are now forecasting a $42 million budget surplus, whereas last month we projected at about $139 million. So very significant, almost $100 million reduction there. And you can see that how that compares to the current fiscal year, which was budgeted at around $179 million. We are above that, so we are overperforming. That's good news, and that will lead to some bill credits and such this current fiscal year. I think that's it there. So let's jump back then, Adrian, if we could, to slide 6. Great. So on slide 6, we talk a little bit about the CARE and FARA $50 bill credit. This current fiscal year, that's something that we included at the outset and end up releasing that sometime in late summer, fall timeframe. We had included that in the May draft budget as well with a strong budget surplus. That's something that we would certainly want to include going forward in light of the pretty material changes here that we've seen between May and June. That is something that we're proposing to eliminate from the next fiscal year. The good news is there's some, pretty significant offsetting factors here that should more than, sort of offset that, taking that bill credit away. So first 2 bullets there, you can see because of the reduction in rates, CARE customers' annual costs are coming down on average by about $31.50. And for FARA customers, their average costs are going down by $37.90. So that's good news. And then as I briefly mentioned, our current fiscal year is also overperforming. So in January of 2024, earlier this year, the board did approve a reserve allocation in our budget surplus, where 60% of that goes to on-bill credits, with a meaningful contribution going to CARE and FARA. That 40% difference was going to the Solar and Storage Incentive Program. And so for this specific allocation for on-bill credits, right now we're forecasting that to be about $34 million, a very significant sum of money. And to give you a sense, a $25 bill credit to all CARE and FARA customers equates to about $3.3 million. So that is a pretty healthy budget surplus. We will be bringing forward an item to the board in the future to sort of outline, how we want to split that, how we would recommend splitting that budget surplus from this current fiscal year. But these are really more for illustrative numbers to show, how meaningful that is. So the good news is that CARE and FARA on-bill credit should be more than offset by these 2 changes. Adrian, next slide, please. This kind of summarizes some of the base case assumptions, many of which I've already touched on, and I'll just highlight a few additional ones. So, of course, as I've already mentioned, the Bright Choice value proposition, we're recommending holding that at a 5% discount to PG&E. Rates are coming down pretty materially from this current fiscal year or current calendar year, and so we're going to maintain that at a 5% discount as our value proposition for Bright Choice. No change to Renewable 100 rate. We talked about the CARE and FARA bill credit. 2024 rates in PCIA are unchanged, just to make that explicit. We talked about 2025 era. Nothing else is meaningful change. Same on collectibles rate, same treatment to GASB 62. So In terms of this slide, I know nothing else to sort of highlight in terms of changes. So Adrian, if we could just jump to slide 9, that will sort of wrap up the all the changes that we've seen in this this draft budget between May and June. Everything else is the same. So with a lower budget surplus net position forecast of around $42 million, you can see the table to the right shows the sort of forecasted balance for our reserves. We are still anticipating to allocate $100 million to the current at the end of this current fiscal year. That would bring our total reserve balance to $331 million, or about close to 41% of our annual operating expenditures. For next fiscal year, the 24 to 25 line item, you can see an allocation there of $42 million. That's what we're forecasting for our budget surplus. If you add that in, it's about $373 million in total reserves. Unfortunately, our OpEx, our annual operating expenditures, is increasing pretty significantly to over $1 billion. The driver of that is simply the inclusion of Stockton and Lathrop, so that's more loads, it's more power to buy, so that is an expected increase in energy costs. That's the good news. But unfortunately, that means we're also going to have a lower percentage for our reserve to OpEx target. We have a target of 50% as a reminder. So the end of this fiscal year, we're projecting that at around 41%. That will actually go down to about 36%, assuming that we do allocate about $42 million to that. So that's the latest kind of forecast on the reserve balance piece. Other changes of note here are because we are continuing to recommend no additions to working capital. We feel like that is sufficient. And the overall waterfall, we are recommending the first $50 million to be fully allocated to reserve funds. So that is why the $42 million here is shown to go to reserves. If we're able to, obviously generate something over that, the first 50 would go fully to reserves. Then beyond that, we are recommending that we would then look to allocate up to $3.3 million to a CareFair on-bill credit. So that would equate to about $25 on-bill credit. If we are able to, again, outperform that, exceed that amount, we would then flip to a waterfall where 60% goes to on-bill credits and 40% goes to the solar storage, the NBT, net billing tariff incentives. That's the same structure we have in this current year's budget surplus waterfall. And so we're proposing up to $25 million amount, which would mean $15 million for on-bill credits and $10 million to NBT solar and storage incentive program. To the extent we have an amount that exceeds the 50, the 3.3, and the 25, then it would flip back to reserves. We hope we're in that position that we're able to do that, but of course we will have to see how prices and such actualize. And so that really sums up all of the changes, the pretty meaningful changes. So, happy to take any questions or comments here.
Thank you, Howard. We'll take some clarifying questions from the committee. No?
I
Yes.
would just like to say that Member Lockman has just joined the meeting.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. Welcome, Member Lakshman. I'll go back to comments or clarifying questions from the committee. Yes.
On slide 3, so what you're saying is PG&E's, when they finally reported what they were spending for energy, or what they're going to bill for energy, it was lower than what we had expected. So that dropped their rates and increased our PCIA.
Not quite. They didn't change what they're billing to their customers. Their rates are maintained at the same level that they had forecasted or set them at the beginning of 2024. You set your rates at the beginning of the year. Obviously, they are subject to some change. We have not adjusted the rates. PG&E has not adjusted their rates for 2024 from what they initially had set them to be. But actual energy prices, you hedge some of your energy. Some of that energy is based off of CAISO energy market prices. What those actualize at determine whether there's a true up, an over collection, under collection, or whether you collected the precise amount you expected to collect. in this case because actual energy prices are lower than they were forecasted to be. And I'm talking about sort of the January to April of 2024 timeframe. PG&E has in fact overcollected. And one would say we have overcollected as a result of that as well. Our own energy costs are a little softer. That's why we are seeing a stronger budget surplus. And so in many ways, the change that we're seeing between the May and June draft budgets is not necessarily a reflection of 25 rates changing. It's really a reflection of 24 actualized prices changing. And so it's simply pulling in some of the revenues that you might have otherwise billed in 2025, actually in 2024, due to how prices actualize.
Okay, so sort of retrospective that what they had to pay for electricity was less, so that the true up means the rates going forward are less. Something to that effect.
Yep.
But then you say on slide 3 that you're expecting higher prices again through 2023 or through 2030. So was the lower prices earlier this year, was that like a one-time windfall because of the really good hydro season, or is there something else going on?
Yeah, great question. And thank you. Yeah, I should absolutely clarify that. So what the note on slide 3, renewable energy and carbon-free energy is seeing a sort of marked increase through 2030. That is still a reflection of what we're seeing. There's two factors there. One is that specifically renewable energy and carbon-free attributes. So renewable energy and large hydro specifically is increasing in cost. So when I refer to a softening of energy prices, important clarification is I'm generally referring to brown power prices. So those have actualized at a lower level than projected for 2024. Renewable energy and carbon-free prices, in addition to resource adequacy, so other energy products, have actually continued to be high or are increasing just from a general trend perspective for 24 and 25. So different energy products, different impacts as a result of us having higher percentage of renewable energy and carbon-free energy procurements. That hits our budget more than it hits PG&E's budget. So that's one distinction that's important to call out. We bear some higher financial risk as a result of that, just given what we're seeing in terms of market dynamics. And I would also say that for 2024, the softening is a you call that one-time windfall. It is that is the current environment that we're in. That does not necessarily speak to how energy prices will continue to persist in 2024 or beyond. What that is a reflection on is generally milder temperatures in the winter, not just here locally, but really nationwide, where it was a fairly mild winter, and as a result of that, natural gas use was lower than expected, and so natural gas prices are actually at historically low levels. And so a lot of our grid power is largely correlated to natural gas prices. So that's one driver of that. Milder temperatures, lower natural gas prices, some more capacity coming online. That forecast continues a bit in 2024. There's finger up in the air, some sense that with the snowpack, if temperatures are able to remain mild through the summer, low prices could persist, but it's really going to be largely temperature driven and natural gas driven. So natural gas price driven, I should say. So we'll see how things continue to actualize. Prices could spike in the summer, exceed our expectations, and that we may actually see rates increase for 2025 relative to where they are today in the latest forecast.
Okay, thank you.
Our other questions, I saw a member submitted. What member? I can't see the members online.
Yeah, this is Shiva Swaminathan.
Yes, Swaminathan. Thank you, please. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Howard. Could we bring up slide number 9, please? So I see a cost increase and probably a revenue increase from 810 to 1.04 million. Did you say that was related to new loads?
That is correct. Yeah. So Stockton and Lathrop are already members, but we'll start serving them in April of 2024. So the OpEx here is a forward-looking annual operating expenditure. So currently our load does not include Stockton and Lathrop. They are significant loads, Stockton specifically. So that's the big driver of that increase from about 800 million to over $1 billion. Yeah.
So my question is, does the PCIA impacted by additional loads which joined later?
So each, whatever, PCIA is done in vintages. So depending on when you begin serving that load, you have a different vintage of PCIA. So yes, Stockton and Lathrop have a different vintage PCIA than our other members. That is correct.
Is it a less favorable PCIA or more favorable PCIA?
That's a good question. I don't recall that off the top of my head. I think with this latest change, it may be slightly more favorable for those customers, but I would have to clarify that point.
And they're about 25% of the current load. If I look at the operating costs, it seems like
they're probably a little less than 25%. So the increase from 800 million to 1 billion is not just Stockton and Lathrop. That's certainly the biggest driver. I think they're more like 15% of the load or so. So there are other factors that are increasing costs, generally increase in net forecasted energy costs, step up of our renewables procurement. So things like that are also increasing energy costs.
Okay. So the newer customers do have a claim on the same collection, the balance of reserves collected previously.
That is correct. We do not have any policy distinction on, differentiating treatment for different customers for reserves or
do we consider that when we when we have customers join us? Is that an analysis we do?
We look at the financial impacts of the new jurisdiction for sure. That's probably one of the things that we scrutinize the most, amongst other more strategic things that you think about relationship and what is the benefit of expansion and other things. But absolutely includes a pretty thorough sort of financial impact analysis, and that is what we review with the board when we seek approval for their inclusion.
Okay, so the big change in the last month has all to do with the springtime energy cost windfall than anything else, the budget change.
That is correct. Yeah, the roughly $1 billion of annual operating expenditures, I don't believe is materially changed from the last draft.
Right. But yeah, okay, very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions in the room? Yes, Vice Chair Souza.
Thank you, Howard. I'm totally remiss in this. I saw an article on how Germany actually overproduced on solar and wind, and the price went through the floor. I'll try and bring that article next time. But I'm seeing actually the statements are that solar and wind, the reliance on it is actually higher. The cost of it is higher, which is, it's a little, it's backwards in my mind. Once we build a solar plant or a wind plant, that eventually that will pay itself off. Of course, we're buying it, right, from sources. I just want to know, as far as AVA is concerned, AVA Community Energy, has there been any projections for the future for if and when we get to the point when there's such an abundance of solar and wind renewable? What a great thing to have. I think we're moving in that direction, hopefully. We are moving in that direction. Has anybody projected what would happen to the prices? And will they go down? Will they go up? Is there some sort of, I don't know, plan or goal for that?
When you say plan or goal, I'm not sure what you necessarily, what that refers to specifically, but absolutely, of course, there are projections of energy prices going forward, decades into the future. That's something that's included in the integrated resource planning that we do, as well as what's mandated by the state. That's on a 10-year planning cycle. And obviously for all of the PPAs, power purchase agreements that we bring forward to the board, solar projects, wind projects, et cetera. You know, in our RFO process where we seek new resources, it includes a very robust quantitative analysis that looks at forward projections. And there are many forward projections available in the market. There's many ways to stress test them. You know, we do a variety of things to look at forward curves. We look at a high number of forward curves with different scenarios on build outs. We do something called capacity planning modeling. You know, you look at different resources coming online over the next 10 years, you model that out in different scenarios to think about where there will be congestion, where there will need to be resources, what kind of resources we should buy as a best fit, sort of least cost sort of approach. You do all those things, and that's how you select your resources. So it is very robust. Yes.
I'm done. Thank you.
Member Weiner.
Yes, thank you. I'm troubled also by the cost issue. But it strikes me that cost generally, if not artificial, relates to supply and demand. Our demand is actually going greater because we're trying to electrify the grid, especially the transportation grid. We don't have enough electric vehicles yet to stretch that problem, but we are getting there. Well, one of the things I'd like to know is whether Ava has thought about trying to use policy measures or to support policy measures that will increase supply, which then has an effect of lowering cost because people compete. And for that issue, I'd just like to point out, I don't have it with me, there's a recent New York Times article on how wind power has not increased because there's a lot of aesthetic opposition to it in many places, and because there aren't that many good places to put it as there are solar. And solar prices have been increasing because of a much longer process for entitlement and opposition from places like the Farm Bureau to using certain kinds of agricultural land, even if it doesn't have water because of our Groundwater Management Act. So there are a lot of ways in which Ava and other community energy entities could assist in helping state policy change to facilitate siting and to streamline the process, never cutting corners, but nevertheless getting there faster so the prices could come down. So it seems to me that's something we should at some point consider, is policies that will bring these costs down. I'm very troubled that we charge less for the PG&E mix than for a total renewable energy mix. And that doesn't encourage people to use renewables. So.
Thank you for those comments. Other comments in the room from the members? Thank you. I'll make some comments myself. I think in regards to the waterfall, and I'm a little nervous about the margin or net revenues now showing at $42 million. And so if we're going to take those net revenues into full reserves, I think that's what's modeled here in 2024-25, that full amount goes into reserves. I'd almost want to flip the waterfall because, you know, that $42 million at the end of the year contributes 2% to the total percent of operating reserves. So it'd be from 35 to 33. Really what I want to understand more the threshold of that board policy of 50% reserves. I mean, if you have $1 billion in reserves, I know it's not that 50%, but, you know, reevaluating why we need to be at 50% is, you know, $950 million not sufficient. Is it because of resource adequacy? Is it because we're not doing working capital? Or maybe we're not investing enough in our policy-making decision to reduce the cost of solar, to Member Weiner's point of view. But Howard, I don't quite understand what is working capital that we're not allocating to. Can you elaborate on that for me just for a second?
Sure. I think there was maybe a couple of points there. One is working capital is just cash to manage the needs for between procurement and other expenses and collection cycle with customers. So, you know, just general cash needs on a short-term basis to meet the operations.
You have
for the
enough of that, I
organization.
guess, working capital, you're saying, that's where you have enough already working capital, you don't need to add to it or change.
That is correct. We're projecting sufficient working capital, so no need to allocate more to working capital. It'll go, you know, directly into reserves. The other quick clarification, if I may, is just I want to make sure that the table's understood here that the OpEx to cover is just showing the annual projected operating expenditures. That's not the target for reserves. I heard you say something about $950 million or something. So yeah, so the reserve policy states that our target is a 50% of annual operating expenditures. So, you know, if we were to technically hit, you know, 500-ish million dollars, that would be roughly 50% of our annual operating expenditures, and that's the reserve target. That's
we're looking at $500 million of $1 billion of OpEx to cover. But if we're only going to net $42 million based on last month's view, we had $138 million. That was a much larger waterfall. Now it's gone to, hopefully, will cover the reserve balance of maybe the first $50 million, and then there wouldn't be any FERA bill credits. You know, that was the estimated 3.3 for the $25, nor will there be any additional incentives for the NBT or that solar storage, plus additional on-bill credits for customers. Is that right? Is that how I see it? If we don't hit that $50 million, there's no additional waterfall?
That's correct.
So I would want to understand, okay, so that's my clarifying question about that. I don't want to make any recommendations at the moment. And can you, last thing about resource adequacy, that's still going up. Isn't that still volatile?
Yes, it is.
Outlier that can really, well, some people blow up this budget. Is that something that would be a concern or no?
No, I think as we do for all of our energy procurement needs, we have, you know, we have procured sufficient volumes throughout time. So we sort of cost average. We, you know, it's not to say that every position's closed, but, you know, we've managed that risk effectively, I think. So no, I don't think there's any outsized risk related to resource adequacy. Of course, there is always general budgetary variability on energy costs. I would expect things to change relative to what they show here. They always do, whether it be, you know, brown power prices, renewable energy prices, resource adequacy prices. We are, you know, sort of in a historically high volatility environment. And so, you know, this is purely our kind of, you know, best estimate towards what those costs will be going forward. Resource adequacy of all the products, while it's itself had a lot of variability and volatility relative to historicals, it actually has a little bit less variance in our annual budget cycle because there's a year ahead procurement obligation where you need to procure the vast majority of your requirements for the following year by October of the previous year. And so all of that is to say we're pretty well procured as a result of that. It's June, we have a final filing deadline in October, and by then we need to be very well procured for 2025. And so in that sense, there's probably a little less variability or risk for that product, at least for next fiscal year.
I heard you say back in October, you had a plan for this budget cycle with resource adequacy, so that is minimal, already pre-planned. And that's in the cost of energy, or is it cost of energy services?
Cost of energy.
And the cost of energy services, is that the local business development plan or something else? Just
no, that is related to our billing services that we have with SMUD.
And
billing and scheduling.
Okay. And the last clarifying question, I mean, given that you'll have a decision for the board to be made next month, how does nuclear play into the options on this budget?
It is not included in any scenario in this budget.
How would it change if the board decided to move forward with that? I'm just trying to clarify that.
I mean, it would really depend on how the board would want to take action. If you just take the allocation and do nothing else, it would have no impact because it's a, you know, it's a pre-allocation, so to speak. If the board wanted to take it and reduce our renewable or carbon-free or large hydro procurements, then obviously that could lead to savings. If the board elected to take it, but also procure more of some other product, it could, you know, it's pretty, you know, unassociated with that, but, you know, there could be a decision by the board to say, yeah, well, we're taking it, but we also want to further, you know, decarbonize our our procurement. And so we also want to add in an action to procure more of renewable energy or large charge or something. So in of itself, there's no budget impact because the nuclear allocation is at $0. And so it would fully depend on any other actions that the board would take with it.
I think I remember somebody saying it would amount to over the entire 3 years. Was it about 11 million total for the nuclear?
There, so in our, I want to be careful that we're not going into other topics, but on the nuclear topic in the previous item that we presented, we showed a forecast going forward some number of years. And that showed some savings with the assumption that as you're taking that nuclear allocation, that may lead to a reduction in future large hydro purchases. And so that can lead to some savings. But there were a few different scenarios laid out there. So, I don't entirely recall which one you're pointing to, but yeah.
Thank you, Howard. Any other member clarifying questions? If not, we'll go to public comments. You have a question, Member Landry?
Yes, Howard, I would like to ask, this may not be exactly on topic, but have we considered further renewable infrastructure in Alameda County, or actually not only in Alameda County, but in, San Joaquin, as we are expanding our territory, and if renewable prices are, going to continue to go up, where are we in terms of building more infrastructure in our territorial area? And I realize that that would be quite a large expenditure, but there could be potential savings further down the road. Do you have any comment about that, please?
Yeah, we are pretty well engaged with any developers that are, working on developing any projects within Alameda County and San Joaquin County, which there are a variety. It's not there's not a very large number, but we are well engaged in all those. I don't want to go into any, sharing any confidential details of the dialogue itself, but we are well engaged and certainly have a high degree of interest in that. We have obviously the Scott Haggerty Wind Center in the Altamont Winds already. There is limited, wind resources that can be added to that area, largely due to bird take issues. And so, yes, there are planned additional megawatts that were part of the conversation on, but I think one of the earlier comments is just sort of pointing to why there isn't more wind, and it is largely because of viable wind resource areas, as well as bird take is one of the biggest issues. In addition, of course, to any interconnection scarcity or issues getting to interconnection. So those are probably the three biggest factors for any in territory large scale renewable energy development. But we are definitely actively engaged in all of those conversations, and that has expanded to San Joaquin County as well. Obviously with that expansion, we actually recently did the ground baking for one of our standalone energy battery storage projects that NextEra is building with us. And that is in San Joaquin County. And we are, as I noted, we're an off-taker to the Altamont Winds project I just noted. We are also an off-taker to the large solar project that Intersect is building in Livermore. That did come with quite a bit of local opposition, but we are a party to that. So that's just a few examples. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Member Weiner.
Just to the point, Member Landry, the project that was just mentioned in Livermore, which is I think called the Aramis project, had a lot of local opposition, and there's a lot of difficulty just with communities in eastern Alameda County, which is where the land is, in trying to build solar, the same in Contra Costa. So again, the question is it still swimming within our lane to think about influencing other governmental policies to make it easier to do this? because otherwise we have limited choices.
Thank you. With that, we'll take, with no other hands raised here or virtually, we'll take public comment.
Great, thank you. Tom Kelly, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thanks, Adrian. I noticed that there isn't any indication of funding going into more renewables and carbon-free projects with those net revenues. And I just wanted to point out to the CAC that the first amount of savings or profit is always going into essentially to respond to the credit rating issue that EBCE has been able to achieve. And I wanted to point out that a credit rating does not necessarily save the agency any money in its projects, but rather brings in new investors from places like Asia and Europe that would otherwise not be interested in doing projects with AVA because it would be uncertain of AVA's credibility and ability to, pay for these projects. So I think, you should take a look at that at some point and just ask yourself whether we should be focusing so much on net revenues and putting money aside for, making sure that we're complying with the requirements of these credit agencies to keep these ratings on. That's the first thing I wanted to point out to you. The other thing is also on the nuclear issue, I just want to remind everybody that if we are looking at any kind of acceptance of the nuclear allocation, we're actually slowing down the purchase of other carbon-free projects. And finally, I would encourage the CAC to take a look at the Padilla report, which the state requires the CPUC and all the LSCs and everything to comply with each year, and demonstrates that the cost for solar and wind projects, hovers around about 6 cents a kilowatt hour. And when I hear Howard talking about volatility and prices and everything, makes me wonder if, AVA is actually negotiating the best deals possible, because overall, throughout the state, these prices have been fairly stable over the last couple of years and are projected to be coming down. So taking a look at that would provide you with information that we've never been able to get from AVA as to what it actually costs to put these projects together. Thanks.
Thank you. There are no further hands raised at this time.
Yeah, quick comment. I know his,
For the record again?
my name is Brendan Pittman, for the record. Thank you. As a member of the community, I'd be curious how price forecasts are correlated with natural gas, and how AVA takes that into account, and if they do, or if there's any information for the public on how we can understand that. I know it's pricing and forecasting is really complex, but I know prices in California are really kind of based on, that marginal price of natural gas. So I'd be curious if there's any information for the public on that, and how the budget accounts for volatility in natural gas price, similar to what happened in 2021, 2022, that price volatility during that year. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one hand raised online. Local Clean Energy Alliance, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Jessica Tovar again, Local Clean Energy Alliance, East Bay Clean Power Lines. One of the things that I really want to emphasize is the local development business plan, and really, getting this agency to kind of go back to its roots, if you will, in terms of the want to not only produce more clean energy locally. And when we talk about that, we are meaning more emphasis on the built environment as well, and integrating those kinds of investments, like the microgrids that we've been advocating for. And I know that I want to appreciate that staff is allocating money towards solar and storage and incentives, and just recognizing there's so much more to do in the long term, and integrating those other pieces of clean energy, which is the energy efficiency, the electrification, doing more seed funding for small community-based organizations who are utilizing community innovation. And, you know, I do know that when we start to employ more of this and own those assets, then we rely less on some of that market purchase stuff that's from out of the communities. And just really wanting to reiterate, the whole point of that is to reduce local pollution, create clean energy jobs, transform our system at the same time. And, you know, all that addresses climate change. And just to really focus back on the heart of the advocacy for this community choice program. So I'd like to look to the future in that things are changing here at Ava Community Energy, and the resilience hubs that we've been asking for, that I know that the board will be, you know, agendizing a study session for, I think will be very, very much something we can all unify on in advocating for solutions to reach our most vulnerable communities and build energy and climate resilience. Thank you very much. Clean power to the people.
Thank you. There are no further hands raised at this time.
Thank you. Comments from the CAC? No comments, and I guess I will share my comments. I think, partially hearing from the public speakers, it's important to understand our pricing forecasting, so transparency will be important, understanding how that's developed. Of course, microgrids and these resiliency hubs are important. I'm just concerned how we're looking at our net revenues and just contributing that forecast, all of it, to the reserves. I think we have to look at that waterfall and be aware that we should look at more those on-bill credits, those incentives for solar storage, before we just put the money away. I mean, the purpose of the agency is to make an impact in our community by creating clean, green jobs, local solar and storage energy that further invest. Because right now, the way the budget looks, like we're just putting money away, we're not really impacting our community with the reserves of the revenue that we're going to maybe be forecasted to show in that next budget. That would be my concern in this budget, that all of it just goes down to the reserves and nothing gets allocated back into the community for that full year. So, you know, I would recommend that waterfall needs to change to be more community first and less reserves. I think that's sort of my comments from that. Yes.
This is an action item for the board.
Correct. Yes, this will be an action item with our recommendations.
So was that a motion?
It could be. I just want to make sure there's any other dialogue or thought leadership from this community. Am I seeing that right or wrong? That it looks like the majority of this is going to go away into the reserves and nothing's really going to become a credit? Because if we don't hit that $50 million threshold, zero goes beyond into the on-bill credits, or nor are there incentives. I was really excited about these incentive programs for solar storage. I think at one point it was up to $40 million. Now it's just down to $25 million. We'll be lucky if there's on-bill credits, because the first threshold of the waterfall goes into the reserves. Yes.
So what you're saying is reduce the amount going to reserves.
My waterfall.
To increase the amount going to credits and solar and storage.
Yeah, I'd reverse it, right? So instead of making the first thing to reserve funds, I would first put the credits for care and fair at first, then that $25 million of budget surplus, and then reserve funds, and then start over where we need to. But at least I think we have to look at that waterfall. It's just sort of goes first into reserves, but doesn't go out to the community. I think the AVA's here formed to be community first, and the reserves are important, but we will have over $330 million expected this year. And based on this May forecast, it's talked about a 66.5 reduction of net revenues from the last month. So we had $138 million, which was just like, oh, that's fine. We'll put 50, and there's $88 million left, but now that's changed because now we've overbilled and we have less revenue in sales per se because of that true up. But I think really we have to look at the care for our customers first, our most vulnerable customers. That's 3.3 first, and then put the $25 million first for the additional budget surplus, and then reserves. So we can maybe look at that $50 million thereafter, and then bring in more incentives that would help us, with our members. So we can do 50-50 split thereafter between additional budget surplus that goes to the one-time bill credits for customers and net billing tariff incentives, and then reserves funds. But we have to really provide feedback that we should be community first. I know it's important to have the reserves, but we'll have over $330 million, even though that pie is getting larger because we're servicing our larger territory. Doesn't mean we should stop investing in our community. That's how I see it. Do I see it incorrect? I just want to make sure there's validation the way I see it from the committee. Yes, member.
Yes, I agree, and I would also like to see more community innovation grants. And what Jessica said in her public comment, greater investment in renewable infrastructure and integrating more of various power supplies, but especially renewable energy, and maybe increasing the local business development plan. Good, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think we should just be in the business of purchasing energy, which we are, but I'd like to see, if I can say this clearly, I would just like to see greater investments in the community to bring this power online for, I want to see more local infrastructure development, or a portion of that money go to that also, or I should say an additional amount to go to that.
So I think it goes back to reworking the waterfall and incorporating further investment in the local business development plan. And maybe Howard, can you help us clarify what's in that plan right now? Do we have anything for local business development?
Yes, that is unchanged from our May draft budget. You can see that. Let me just point you.
The 11.6.
The very last slide of the overall presentation. So $22.4 million is being allocated local development budget. So that's not changed. That's in the, yeah, that's just, that's not related to the budget surplus, just to be clear.
So we're saying there's already $22.4 million in local development funding.
That's in the budget, correct?
Slide 11 or 18? Yes, that's right, the details. Thank you, Howard, for your patience. So we have the local development business plan there with $22.4 million. Is there a modification you suggest, Member Landry, or should we look at that waterfall? Because we're already putting $22.4 million. Was it the comment that the Local Clean Energy Alliance was saying they wanted more money there or more resources invested there? I think I've heard them in the past say that they want to see smaller grants and with technical assistance. I believe that's been.
Yes, those are the community innovation grants, and those are the community innovation grants, and I'd like to see greater investment there.
Sure. I think generally speaking, we want to flip the waterfall and see further investment in the community innovation grants. And that local development plan is important. I know that we want to put the money away towards those reserves, but if we only focus on the reserves, it's great that we have that 22.4, but maybe we look at those on-bill credits first, those incentive programs with on-bill credits, and thereafter you put more reserves. We put the reserves away from thereafter. So if we have more, 3.3, then 25, that's 28 million of the 42 right now. So we're looking 28.8 of 42, that's almost 50% or so before you hit the reserves. And you can go up to your $50 million thereafter once you hit that 28.8. So first 28.8 goes towards Carafera, then the one-time on-bill credits for customers and MBT incentives. That's the 28.8 first. The balance of that 42 goes towards reserves up to that, $50 million amount that you'd like to get to. I think that's what's recommended, to go up to $50 million. And then we can do further investment in the community. Or reserves, depends on the board's wishes. And I can restate it, I think that would be my motion. So really looking at this, approving the budget as is with revising the waterfall for the first $28.8 million, going toward the Carafera and the on-bill credits with NBT incentives. Thereafter, from net revenues towards the reserves up to $50 million. And thereafter, we can look at more community innovation grants and additional reserves where needed. I'll look for a second.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Other comments or clarification on my motion? For the second.
Well, I'd like to ask Howard, with that proposal, so if the first 50 million was not allocated to reserves, what is your response to the impact of that?
I think if you look at slide 9, the reserve waterfall is there would be no contributions to reserves, so we would be held at the $331 million. And so, a quick rounded math is our reserves would drop to 32%. So from 41% to 32%. Our reserve policy does, require us to target that 50%, but it doesn't speak to the specifics of how much you need to contribute year to year, of course. So there is discretion by the board to make that decision.
Target is 50%?
Our target is 50%. Yeah, correct. So it would, there's a fairly meaningful reduction in our reserves, mostly driven by the fact that our annual operating expenditures is increasing significantly, just to be clear.
Howard, could you speak we're having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, let me move a little closer to the computer. Can you hear me okay right now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so yes, the target reserve policy is 50%. And so that would, by not allocating anything and given the significant increase in our annual operating expenditures, our balance, which is currently projected to end up at around 41% with the current fiscal year's reserve allocation, would drop to about 32% given the increase in expenditures. So it would, it would not allow us to provide any more reserves. And so, yeah, I guess that's the short of that.
To Member DeFranco, the motion is not to put nothing. It's from the 42, the first 29 rounded up goes towards the community on-bill credits and the net billing tariff incentives. And there's a balance of $13 million at a minimum that will go toward reserves. And we are increasing our operating expenses to cover the additional service territory, but at least the motion is to continue to make a reserve. But as long as we have more, which ideally we will, then we cover that $50 million goal. But at first, community first, and then put the reserve secondary. Member Winder.
Chair Hernandez, your motion is to amend this to have a certain amount to go to reserve funds, but the rest to the CARE and FARA?
So addressing first and foremost the CARE and FARA, as well as the other on-bill credits, as well as the net billing tariff. So we're looking at bullet point 3 and 4 on the screen first, and the second bullet point as third in the waterfall. We're looking at bullet point 3, that $3.3 million first, then bullet point 4, that $25 million, and then bullet point 2 thereafter, up to $50 million.
So the first 25 million would go to the additional FARA, CARE FARA, and then the rest to the reserve. Is that right?
So I think there's about 3.3 for CARE and FARA.
Yeah.
So that's what we have there first. That's the first thing, $3.3 million, then $25 million on bullet point number 4, the additional budget surplus, they call it, but $25 million what they're estimating, and thereafter surplus.
All right.
Because right now, anything above the first 50 was referencing bullet point number 2. So first, we're trying to, the waterfall would hit the reserves first. So they're looking to have up to $50 million of reserves first before they do any waterfall to the community. I think it needs to be community first before we put money back into reserves, especially when we have over $300 million. And yes, the percentage is going down, but we are enlarging the service territory, which makes it a larger operating expense to cover, to provide the energy. But we'll still have over $330 million in that reserve fund at least.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. I think we have a second from Member Landry. Any other hands raised? Adrian?
There are no hands raised. online.
Quick
Oh, yes,
question.
actually.
So
yes, there
sorry.
is.
So sorry. That on page 8, now I might have missed it. Sorry, Howard. The last bullet was the margin reduced by 66.5%. What again was the cause of that?
That is the reduction in rates, and therefore the reduction in revenue reduces the sort of the margin associated with your dollars from the revenue itself.
And this was the PG&E rates that we followed, right?
That is correct. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's good. Thank you. Member Swamiritan.
Yeah, so, Chair, just to understand your proposal, what is the net impact of your proposal? What would be the transfer to the reserve be?
At the moment, it'd be $13 million from the
Down from 43.
From the 43 for the 42.2, yes. Instead of the 50. So we first were looking at the 28.8 million of the $42.2 million. That would cover the CARE FARA and other on-bill credits, plus 25 million towards the net billing incentives. So we're looking at bullet point 3 and 4. Those will be the first items in the waterfall, respectively. And then up to $50 million to be allocated to the reserve funds. And then we can speak more about additional budget surplus thereafter. I think that's where Member Landry mentioned the community innovation grants would be nice to also give additional funding towards that. But that's up to the discretion of the board. I think currently right now we're looking at the bullet point number 3 to take care of CARE and FARA on-bill credits estimated at $3.3 million. And then take the $25 million for additional on-bill credits and the net billing tariff incentives. And then balance from the net revenue would be up to $50 million for the reserves.
So my question is, are we saying that building up the reserve is not a priority, it's a third priority?
I think it is a priority for Ava and and staff. I think the first focus is that the organization was built for the community, not necessarily for the investors, as I mentioned, to make us more favorable for additional investments. But I think right now we'll have at least $330 million plus another $13 million because of that net reduction of revenues. Was last month in the view was $138 million in that budget view. Now it's only down to $42 million because of that revenue reduction primarily. And then I
Would
feel
the chair be amenable to keep the current order but reduce the $50 million to 30 million? So effectively what we are saying is, I have a question for Howard. What was the order last year, and how much was it? What did we have 50 million as a starting point too?
You're talking about the current fiscal year that we're in, and what did we propose last year?
The last year.
The order was first the working capital, which was $50 million towards working capital, then to reserves, $100 million to reserves. And then the remainder after that was split 60-40.
Okay.
Unbilled credits and solar and storage incentive program. That's the current fiscal year.
Right. Okay. So I like the loading order, the waterfall order, Chair, but I can see how the reserve buildup can be at a lower pace. I think we'll achieve your objective, but keeping the same loading order.
Thank you. I heard the request for amendment. We'll have a more conversation here in the room. A member that's
a question for Howard. In the May budget, what was the amount to be allocated to the reserve funds?
It was $100 million.
So the change to the June budget was to cut the allocation to reserve funds in half.
Sorry, give me 1 second. Let me just confirm that. My memory is just a little foggy right now, so let me just confirm if it was 75 or $100 million now. I'll do that really fast. Just 1 moment. It was, yes, it was $100 million.
The same as the prior year.
Correct.
And after seeing the change in the rates and the PCIA, you reduced the proposed amount to 50 million.
Correct. That is largely because the rates are, of course, I know there was reference to, community first and what are we doing for the customers, but I will just as a friendly reminder that reduction in rates goes directly to the benefit of customers in terms of lowering their energy costs. So in many ways, we're reducing from a $100 million reserve initially recommended to a $50 million reserve recommendation. That $50 million certainly, and the reduction of the revenues as a whole at about $100 million is all, all a reduction in costs ultimately to our customers.
And okay. And to the forecast going forward, you're not expecting PG&E to do this again on us?
I certainly, sorry, please finish your statement. I got there.
That going forward, you don't expect PG&E's rates, their true up to happen the same direction again next year?
I think it's always difficult to predict energy prices. We are a volatile environment. Obviously we give our best estimate based off forward curves, but there's so many different dynamics that impact energy prices. So if anything, I would say most likely it's not going to be what we projected. It's going to be higher or it's going to be lower because that's the type of uncertainty and variability that we see. I think it's a good estimate, but things will always actualize differently, and that's going to be different dependent on things like what is the temperature, where are natural gas prices at, how does the snowpack melt, how windy is it, how sunny is it, all of those factors feed into this, do the interconnections happen in time, all of that. So I think it is highly unpredictable. So PG&E's rate setting takes that into account as they do forecasts. I think this is an unusual change that happened between the May and the June budget. It is rare that we have seen this significant of a change in right in the midst of our budget setting process, but it is a standard process for PG&E to do an ERA filing in that roughly May timeframe, and for them to do a filing towards the end of the year. The filing at the end of the year, of course, actually sets the prices for 2025. So we will see a forecast. We will see an update, of course, towards the end of the year on what the actual rates will be. And it is hard to say how they may change, because it's going to be dependent on energy prices this summer and how that's forecasted. And there are also some regulatory proceedings that will also even impact that take into account other things related to renewable energy attributes and resource adequacy pricing. So there are a lot of dynamics that will likely cause this to change in some regard, but it's highly unpredictable.
I have a silly question.
Vice Chair.
Actually, it's just opened up a lot of questions in my head. This is putting you on the spot, Howard, but what is the average cost for a FERA household for their electric bill? Some point, I know you probably don't have that figure, but at some point, I would like to know what $25 would do for them.
Yeah, so actually, if you look at slide 6, you can actually see we have provided average care and FERA generation cost comparisons. And so you can see CARES on the left and FERA's on the right. And these are the differences for the 24-25 fiscal year. So that's not looking just at one specific calendar year, but sort of specific to our next fiscal year, what the average care customer costs are. And so, it's.
I go into people's homes all the time. Today I went into a woman's home. Her bill was $600-700. I'd included gas. But I'm seeing many homes that are in the $200 to $300 for electric. I think that if we can encourage energy efficiency, simply putting in more insulation so that the heating and cooling doesn't have to be on. Those are things that I would like to see, rather than, putting this money away in a bank for another day. But that's just my opinion. I don't know if I don't even want to make an action item on that, but I'm kind of adding on to yours with that. I'd like to see some of that money go to something that would prevent us even having to, cutting it on the back end. So energy efficiency, jobs, encouraging programs like that. Because I think $25 for somebody's bill is a cup of coffee, a couple cups of coffee. Just saying.
Based on what I'm hearing, I'd like to take Member Swaminathan's proposed action and say, keep the loading order, the waterfall with the 30 million instead of 50 million. And then after number 4, add a bullet point that says that 20 million that we're taking out of the initial reserve amount be designated for local development programs with a focus on equity. and then go back, number 5 with a new bump to number 6, where any reserves after that or any additional funds after that go into reserves.
So that, if that's a substitute motion, I just need clarity on the, I think I'm hearing you say $30 million in reserves. And can you clarify the other 20 or 20 million?
Yeah, so then that 20 million that we would be taking out of the reserves for bullet point 2.
But we have to look at what we're projected right now, so I'm just gonna jump in. It's at 42.234, so I think anything after $50 million, so I just wanna be clear about that, because right now we're at 42.2 is what they're proposing, up to $50 million in reserves. So you're saying $30 million.
For reserves, that's what,
Reserves,
member Simone suggested, and then adding in between bullet point 4 and 5, that, before we put any additional budget surplus into reserves, we allocate any additional budget surplus up to 20 million to local development programs with a focus on equity.
Can you describe equity? Is there just?
Well, as we're talking about, programs that would benefit the community, but, looking at programs specifically that could help lower income community members, that would, potentially also tap into the community grants, before kind of looking at funds allocated to other customers that might have more needs.
I just ask for additional clarity. Are we removing unbilled credits and net billing tariffs from your substitute?
No,
motion?
so my motion would be to keep all of that, and then, for bullet point 5, where any remaining budget surplus go to reserves, we would say, that if there's budget surplus, 20 million go toward local development programs, and then the remaining go toward reserves.
So I'll need a second for that.
I'll second it.
No, I think Member Landry.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a substitute motion now. So at $30 million, let's see, for reserves. And then we look at that
Allocate,
up to
allocate 20.
up to $20 million for those current programs, unbilled credits and net billing tariffs. I think the split was 60-40. Is that what we're looking to keep? Just want to try to create more substance to the motion. Clarity.
So I wasn't suggesting any
no split.
modification to bullet point 4, just an additional bullet point that would be an additional 20 million for local development programs.
And we're not talking through bullet point 3. The fair unbilled credit, so just not really calling that out anymore.
I wasn't modifying, or I wasn't proposing modifications to either of those bullet points.
Go ahead.
For clarity, the surplus allocation we're talking about currently is $42 million. So a little over. So if you do the CARE and FARA, then it's down to a bit under 40 million. And then if you do the 25 million to, so if we took 30 million for reserves, that would drop it down to 10 million left. For 30 million on the reserves, 3.3 million on CARE and FARA, round numbers. That would be about 10 million left instead of the 25 million on the third bullet, on the fourth bullet point.
Yes. I'm trying to make sure we have this correct for the first and second and good understanding. So we're gonna look at $30 million to be at reserves, to the reserve funds. Look at any additional surplus above the first.
Local development.
I'm sorry. No worries, go ahead.
So this would stay the same. And then this would come here, 20 million to local development.
So we're gonna keep first $30 million to reserves funds. This,
So this one just gets reduced.
and so any additional remaining budget surplus above the first. Doesn't make sense to me, I'm sorry.
We're just moving.
Howard, could you bring up the water flow chart, that slide? I think it's good to have that slide on the screen as we are discussing this.
Adrian, I'll ask you to perhaps do that.
In the staff report, it's numbered, so it might be easier to look at it that way.
Try to make sure I get this correct. I mean, I just want to expect the first and second and walk through it. So we'll stick to the first bullet point, no allocation to working capital. Oh, we're looking at the staff report now.
Do you want to, which one do you prefer?
This slide, I think it's bigger, if that's okay, same language. So up to the first $30 million to be allocated to reserves fund. Do we keep these third bullet point the same, or does that crossed out?
So my proposal is keep those the same,
Nice.
and then.
So
the-
$3.3 million estimated, that $25
Right.
on bill
And then the
credit.
next one is additional budget surplus above that. Would be allocated 60, 40, up to 25 million. And then if there's additional budget surplus above that, 20 million for local development, business plan programs, the focus, or try to bring in an equity lens as much as possible. I mean, we can't get into super details of that without really digging into all the programs. And then that last bullet point would come after any additional budget surplus
Thank you.
to previous allocation.
Perfect. Okay, does that make sense for the second? I can repeat it. So I understand the first $30 million goes to reserves. The estimated 3.3 goes to the CARE FARA on bill credit. And then anything thereafter, up to $25 million goes to that 60-40 split. And then we add a new bullet point, up to $20 million to the local business development plan, and thereafter any additional reserves funds. Okay. Good. Thank you very much for that patience and time for everybody to walk through that. Just making sure I understood that.
There's a lot
And-
going on.
Yes, no worries. And is that okay with the second, Member Landry?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Any other comments, clarifying questions? That's just 1 minute on. Yes.
Yeah, clarifying question. So I support that motion. The last bullet of $20 million for this fiscal year, it will be, if the assumptions hold true, would be 0.
Yes.
Okay, but if it were not, then it would get some funding. Very good. Thank you.
Right. So if there
And-
was extra surplus, then it would go to the programs
Right.
first before additional reserves.
And what is the current budget, Howard, for the local development programs?
For next fiscal year, we have $22.4 million allocated to local development.
Okay. So at the end of the period, if there is surplus in 2026, you will have additional budgets. That's what this motion results in, correct?
And that's 2025, isn't it? June of 2025? Oh, no.
But we won't know the amounts till the end of 2026. 25 budget cycle.
That's not a question to me, right? That's clarifying the waterfall, I assume.
Yes.
Is there any other comments? I think members will make it. Is that clear? Or do you want to repeat your last question?
No, I think I'm good. I'm good for now. Thank you.
Any other comments? Clarifying questions? If not, we'll do a roll call vote on substitute motion.
Great, thank you. This is a substitute motion made by DeFranco and seconded by Landry. Member Landry,
Yes.
Member Weiner,
Yes.
Member Stevenson,
I abstain.
Member Swaminathan,
Yes.
Member Lakshman,
Yes.
Member DeFranco,
Yes.
Member Carr,
Yes.
Member Lukes,
Yes.
Vice Chair Souza,
Yes.
and Chair Hernandez.
Yes.
Motion is affirmed.
Take a little bit of work. We'll take about a 7-minute break, just refocus, and we'll come back about 8:08. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Cool. You'll be back at 8:08. Thank you, Howard. All right, we're moving on to item 6, long-term offtake agreements. It's a board action item. Consider the approval and execution of the purchase power agreement for Rosemary Solar and Storage Contract and the IPA Storage Contract. Who's presenting? Is that you, Scott?
Hi, good evening. This is Scott Harding. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Hi, Scott Harding, Director of Origination for the Power Resources Department. Adrian, if you could pull up the presentation, I'll be happy to present 2 projects to the members this evening.
Okay, just hold on one second. Great.
So if you go to the next slide, or the slide number 3, we have 2 contracts that we are seeking approval for. Both are 20-year agreements, and both came as a result of the 2023 long-term resource request for offers. The first project is a 70 megawatt solar facility combined with a 70 megawatt 4-hour storage facility. It comes with all environmental attributes and resource adequacy, and it's located in Fresno County, California, and Long Road Development Company is the developer for this project. And it has a COD of June 1st, 2028. And the second project is a standalone storage facility that is a partial offtake agreement of 100 megawatts for 4 hours, 400 megawatt hours storage facility. And that will be for the energy and resource adequacy from that facility that's located in Los Angeles County. The seller and developer is IPA Power Development, and the project online date is June 1st, 2027. If you could go to the next slide, please, Adrian. Just before I jump into a little bit more about Long Road Energy, just wanted to mention briefly and highlight that these 2 projects were selected as a result of a robust evaluation that was utilized as a result of the 2023 RFO solicitation. And that evaluation was utilized for all selected projects, including these 2. And these are these 2 projects are 2 of the last projects. We may have one other that will be brought forward in another month or 2 as a result of the 2023 RFO. But this initial first project that I want to talk about is with Long Road Energy Company, and they're led by a number of executives that came out of First Wind Energy, and it was founded in 2016. They have 1.9 gigawatts of solar projects, and they've brought 11 major projects to COD since 2019. And they have contracted for 3.5 gigawatts of operational projects that are either under construction or operating at this time. That includes the solar.
What's COD for?
Commercial operation date, when the project comes online and produces energy to the consumer, to the buyer.
Thank you.
Long Road has, quite a bit of experience with other CCAs. They have at least one other contract that is in operation with Marin Clean Energy. And we've also, AVA has also contracted with them for 2 other projects, one a 37.5 megawatt project, solar and storage, and another 42.5 megawatt project of solar and storage that were recently approved. You can go to the next slide, please. The project is called Rosemary Solar, and it's a solar and storage facility, as I mentioned. It's contract for 70 megawatts, once again, of solar, and that's nameplate capacity, and it's 70 megawatts of storage for 4 hours, which is 280 megawatt hours total energy. It's located in Fresno County. We are the off-taker of this particular project, of the entire project, so it's one single facility, as mentioned before, for 70 megawatts of solar and 70 megawatts of storage. It's a 20-year agreement. COD, as mentioned before, is June 1st, 2028. It does have the ability within the agreement that is a little unique than other agreements to downsize to 35 megawatts on the storage side. And that's only because of the substation that it will be connecting to is called the Manning substation. And if there's a delay in that Manning substation, then they won't have the ability to downsize. But for that downsizing feature, we as the buyer have the ability to opt out of the agreement if we see fit. And so that gives us the ability to look at market prices at that time when the facility is built, or if the facility is delayed, the substation facility that is. If it's delayed, then we have the ability to opt out of the agreement. So that gives us options at that time, and that's a very good thing. And they've committed towards paying prevailing wages and seeking union labor. You can go to the next slide, please. The other project, which is a standalone storage facility, is being developed by IPA. And this facility, IPA as a developer it was founded back in 2017. They have 32 projects totaling 15.3 gigawatts in construction or in operation. Another 19 projects that total more than 8 gigawatts of installed capacity in operation, with IPA as the 100% owner of development subsidiaries. They have key project team experience in the ISO market of over 2.8 gigawatts, with either in operations or that has CODs in 2024. Blackstone, which is the backer of IPA's balance sheet, has committed to more than 18 billion of energy-focused equity investment. If we go to the next slide, I'll describe a little bit more about the project itself. The total project size is 400 megawatts. We are only contracting for 100 megawatts of that. And again, the expected COD is June 1st, 2027. They will be also paying prevailing wages and seeking union labor. And that's all I have on this project. If you can go to the next slide. That is all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions, but we'll be seeking approval for these two projects. And these two projects are a great addition to the AVA portfolio that allows us to continue to be compliant in RA and in RPS at a low and reliable, cost-effective rate.
Thank you very much for the presentation on these two projects. I'll look for any clarifying questions from our members in the room and online. Yes, Member Lutz.
I have a question. Scott, are these are 20-year contracts. Are they structured in a way? I'm just thinking of PG&E piling the PCIA on us because they entered into contracts, and then the price of competing products declined after they had entered into those contracts. So what's the risk and any mitigating features in the contract if the prices of solar and storage decline over the 20-year contract?
Yeah, Rosemary has a very nice feature if the substation is not built on time that it's connecting to, that we have the ability to opt out. So within the next 2 years, if we find out that the substation is going to be delayed more than 180 days from its current online in-service date as a substation, then we have the ability to essentially tell the developer that we want to opt out of that agreement. And so that gives us the ability within that 2-year period to look at the markets, see what is happening, and decide if we want to take it at that time. Over a 20-year period, what we're doing between these two agreements and all the other agreements that we've been signing recently is looking at 10-year agreements, 15-year agreements, and 20-year agreements. These happen to be 20-year agreements. So this gives us what we call contract tenor diversity. So in our portfolio, we have a number of short-term agreements that are already and that are being procured on a monthly basis. And then these longer-term agreements allow for us to have a nice tenor diverse portfolio that allow us to act as a hedge, if you will, against price volatility. Again, we don't know if prices are going up. We don't know if prices are going down. There's different forecasts out there that change from time to time. But these two agreements particularly give us a good weighted portfolio that act as a good balance to our other portfolio elements, which are shorter term.
Okay, so this contract is that we pay that rate for the full 20 years. If 10 years down the line, we could have gotten a similar product for half price, that's our problem. If 10 years down the line, we couldn't have found a similar product for twice that price, that's their problem. So there's no hedging or anything on this, or any chance to renegotiate after 10 years or something?
No, but I would reiterate that when you look at our total portfolio, because your concern your question is a good question, but if you look at our total portfolio, these are long-term projects that allow us to be compliant in RA, RPS. Those are not markets that you want to just leave open position. Otherwise, you're at risk of not being compliant as a whole. So these allow us to be compliant, and that is a critical activity that we're doing over the next 5 to 10 to 20 years. But as far as looking at our total portfolio, these act as a good balance to the entire portfolio. And there's portions that are long-term. These are long-term portions of that portfolio, but there's also portions that are procured on a short-term basis that allow us to take advantage of those more near-term price movements and balance our portfolio and really, in the end, give us price stability, but still give us a little bit of opportunity to take advantage of those shorter-term price movements that may be up and they may be downward.
And what's our total portfolio in megawatts?
So our total portfolio that we're looking at for example, 2030 is around 1750 around 1800 total max capacity. So these are 70 megawatts and 100 megawatts of that.
So, yeah.
And that's just capacity. Energy is about 8.2 gigawatt hours a year. And these are about 200,000 of that.
Okay. Thank you. Member Lakshman.
Right, if you can pull up slide number 5, I was a little bit confused on the unit of measure, so trying to understand.
I heard slide number 5, is that what we're bringing up?
Yeah. So here on bullet number 3, you have 70 megawatt. I'm assuming that is the solar.
That's correct. And storage. 70 megawatts of solar and 70 megawatts of a storage facility.
Okay, maybe if you can call it that way, that'll make it clear to everyone, at least to me. And also line bullet number 4, plant size of 70 megawatt. Again, is that solar or?
So the downsizing feature actually only applies to the storage part of the facility. And that's a good
Right.
clarification edit that I should make for the board. But the downsizing, there's already a 70 megawatt deliverability that's been achieved with this project. But if the Manning sub is delayed, or if the requirements for the upgrades to the Manning sub to attach this project to the facility, then the resource adequacy portion that comes from the battery storage would be downsized to 35 megawatts.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand. So the power that comes out of storage will be limited to 35 megawatts of power at that time. Is that correct?
Yes, if the substation that it's attaching to is delayed,
Okay.
or if there's a situation that requires additional build outs that take more time.
Okay, maybe consider rewording. It doesn't come across that way to me.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you.
Same thing in slide number 6 as well. So if you can, I don't want to hold everyone, but if you can go through bullet number 3 and 4, that will be helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Member Swaminathan.
Yes, Scott, I have a broader question. We have done many contracts over the past 5 to 8 years. Could you tell us about how the trend of these commercial terms have been over the past 5 years? Has it declined, the cost declined, increased, stayed flat? That's the first question. And the second part is particularly regarding technology. The energy storage loss percentage in the contract, have they remained the same or have they also increased?
I had a visitor for the first question. I'll have to ask you to repeat the first question. A visitor was here just underneath my chair here, so it distracted me, one of my kids. But the first question, could you please repeat that?
The commercial terms of the prices for the contracts, have they declined, increased, or remained the same? And the second question was about energy storage loss factors. Have they improved over the years?
Yeah, as far as the second question is concerned, the industry has gained knowledge into what to do that will allow those loss factors within the storage facilities to improve and be more solid within the agreement between the buyer and the seller. So that has, as far as, I remember doing a deal back in 2016 for a storage facility, and the efficiency rate on that just wasn't great. It was still very new in the industry, but since then things have improved drastically. So we've, within our agreements, have ensured that our storage rates are within a reasonable range that are industry standard. So that's your question number 2. But as far as the rate of cost,
I didn't mean the rates, I mean the loss factors.
Right.
Okay.
So the loss factor is what
have increased.
Those have tightened up in terms of what their abilities are to do. So if you're referring to the efficiency rate,
factors, yes.
Yeah, the round trip efficiency has improved in terms of how it functions within storage facilities. So we've been able to get our agreements to tighten the parameters around those efficiencies, and that has been a good thing, and that's reflected in the storage facility parts of these agreements. The other question, and the other question that you had was in regards to the cost aspects. There are parts of that have improved based on their production and based on their output, but the cost of storage materials, for example, and solar panels, for example, have fluctuated from time to time. There are different tariffs out there that when you're importing solar panels, there are different tariffs that affect the price. It doesn't necessarily always go up, and it doesn't necessarily always go down. Those prices are fluctuating on a long-term basis. If I look at 2020, those prices have gone up roughly, but if I look at maybe the last year or two, those prices have improved. So there's some differences in those longer term prices, and that will continue to be the case over time as we sign these long-term agreements, that there'll be some fluctuations over time, depending on a number of different factors that affect the material costs of those, of the different aspects to build those facilities.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, other comments, Vice Chair?
So when we look at, say, 15.3 gigawatts of power based in, where's IEPA is in Fresno, is it? In LA? Okay, so if we're looking at, say, 15.3 gigawatts of power, an electron is an electron is an electron, but where does that actually go? How does that actually get calculated? Because if it goes across lines, as you know, there's line loss, especially in long distances. So where does that actually count, these gigawatts? Where do they count at the meter, at the homeowner's meter? Do we have a station, a distribution station? Where does it count?
So that's a good question, and appreciate that question. Just to be very clear, the IPA Gabriel Best project is a 100 megawatt by 400 megawatt hour facility. I think there might have been a slide that had IPA developing 15.3 gigawatts of power, but that's not what we're contracting for here. So I just want to be clear about that. But to answer your question, the state of California has a grid operator, California ISO, who keeps track of where the flow of energies are going from one zone to another. So in this particular case, this Gabriel Best project is located down in Southern California, but that is being tracked at the meter, at the facility, and then where it sinks at AVA's load sinking meter. That's being tracked on paper. Energy always travels through the path of least resistance, but the paper activity that's being tracked is being tracked by the California ISO, and that essentially is determined based on a daily and hourly schedule that is between the buyers and the sellers of these facilities, that the ISO balances the differences between those loads and those demands. So in a nutshell, it's a scheduling activity that occurs at the point of intertie of the project and at the point of where we consume the project at our load pocket as AVA Community Energy. And between those 2 points, those are tracked between buyers and sellers and the California ISO.
Well, I see that it's managed, and it's managed in a way that hopefully gives us the benefit where we need it. But I guess my question is based on, do we get penalized for long distance production of power? I mean, I can understand that, you know, an electron might end up being generated in Los Angeles and it ends up in a house in Los Angeles, and we actually basically got credit for it because it's in the area. But I just want to know, are we penalized because of of this long distance? That's all I'm asking.
No.
Thank you. Member Weiner.
Just in general, there was a time when solar prices were higher and then they became much lower and went through the bottom. But I expect them to go up in the next several years as we go towards 100% domestic content and we go towards project labor agreements everywhere, especially in California. So I really think that having 20-year contracts is a good thing. I think it's a good hedge in this case. That said, I need to announce I'm going to recuse myself from this item because our firm does represent a very good company long run. So not on this project, but I think I should recuse myself.
Thank you. Any other comments, clarifying questions? If not, we can go to, Member Landry.
Yes, I would like to ask, both of these projects, you state are committed towards paying prevailing wages and seeking union labor. I'm just curious how you monitor that, please.
Appreciate the question. Within these agreements, we ask that the developer provide a report to us prior to meeting certain milestones within the agreement. And within that report, they need to tell us exactly how they are staying committed to paying prevailing wages and hiring union labor.
Thank you.
Public comment, if any?
There are no hands raised this time.
Great. Any other comments or questions from the advisory committee?
Is this an action item?
It is an action item.
Yeah, so I move for approval of these projects.
Do I have a second? All right. First by Vice Chair Souza, second by Member Lutz. Any other comments or questions? Just Member Weiner, I know you're going to excuse yourself. Let's just get to this one vote and then we'll let you go. Anything else? All right. If not, we'll do the roll call vote.
May I have the first and second, please?
First, Vice Chair Souza, second, Member Lutz.
Thank you. Member Landry.
Yes.
Member Stevenson.
Yes.
Member Swaminathan.
Yes.
Member Lakshman.
Yes.
Member DeFranco.
Yes.
Member Carr.
Yes.
Member Lutz.
Yes.
Vice Chair Souza.
Yes.
Chair Fernandez.
Yes.
Motion is affirmed.
All right, thank you very much. With that, we go to item number 7. Then we'll have number 8, which is a consent item, then number 9 with the member staff announcements, but hopefully we can get closer to the, wrapping up in the next 20, 30 minutes. Thank you.
That's good. All right. The slides ready, Adrian?
We're looking at the managed charge program scope under the DERMS contract. Is that the item we're covering?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks for having us and myself. I'm Brett Wiley, and I lead AVA's electric mobility programs. Tonight, in this presentation, we'll go over a refresher on distributed energy resource management systems, why AVA needs managed charging as a part of our DERMS solution, an overview of this particular program, and a background on the program solicitation and why we selected OptiWatt as the vendor. Next slide. So at the last CAC meeting and the May board meeting, my colleagues presented on DERMS, which stands for Distributed Energy Resource Management System. And as a reminder, this is a software platform designed to communicate with and optimize the operation of multiple distributed energy resources, or DERs, that would be located across our service area. Some of those DERs are listed up here, and we'll focus on electric vehicles and charging tonight. Another term for this is virtual power plants, if you've also heard that before. And as a reminder, the AVA Board of Directors approved a resolution for our CEO to negotiate and execute a contract with Lunar Energy, who is our preferred DERMS provider. And that was done at our May 2024 board meeting. So why does AVA need managed charging? Rates have been a primary tool by load-serving entities for a long time at changing customers' usage behavior. These are two of the most common rates for AVA's EV drivers. 48% of our EV drivers are on the EV2 rate, and 30% are on eTOUC. For EV2, the bundled price per kilowatt hour difference between peak and off-peak is 18 cents in the winter and 31 cents in the summer, while eTOUC is a mere 3 cents in the winter and 10 cents in the summer difference between the lower peak and the higher peak. It's also worth noting that while visually those bars look the same, those are just like easy images, it's worth noting that EV drivers would actually save 31% on electricity costs, including their charging, between midnight and 3 p.m. on the EV2 rate compared to the eTOUC rate. So these rates have existed for a while, and they're designed to shift customer behavior. So a big question is, do rates alone do that? Next slide. So at the start of last year, AVA ran a managed charging pilot with a sample of our EV driving customers to test the potential for load management. The orange bars on this graph represent the participants' total unmanaged EV charging load at half-hour intervals across the entire pilot, while the green bars represent managed EV charging load during that same period of time. The blue box highlights the 4 to 9 p.m. peak period, when customer costs are higher, no matter which TOU rate they may be on, and AVA's cost to serve those customers are also higher, in addition to the increased impacts on the grid and higher emissions during that time. The goal of the pilot was to shift and shape EV charging load out of that window, which we achieved by reducing daily EV load between 3 p.m. and midnight from 44% down to 6% among the participants. So to answer the question, rates alone are not shifting charging behavior among EV drivers, and managed charging drives significant impact. We also learned that in this pilot, EV charging load is quite flexible. The average plug-in time, the total amount of time a vehicle was plugged in, was on average 12 hours for every charging session, while only 2.5 hours of level 2 charging was needed. So we have a lot of room in that 12-hour window for our average customer to actually be turning on and off the charging of those vehicles. Customers also reduced their EV charging costs and got their EVs by their desired ready-by time, amounting to high customer satisfaction in surveys, and demonstrated by only 3% of charging sessions being overridden in instances where someone needed their vehicle faster than it would have been on the managed charging schedule. Similar results are coming from existing programs with our peers at MCE, Peninsula Clean Energy, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and Sonoma Clean Power. Next slide. And so while this pilot was focused on, this pilot was focused on shifting load out of the peak 4 to 9 p.m. window, the blue box has now moved to 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., which represents the period with the least EV charging in our pilot, and generally the least amount of home charging among EV drivers, despite the continued prevalence of working from home. Next slide. This same time period is also the time for peak solar and other renewables on the California grid, as reflected by this CAISO supply trends graph on the right, and reflective of the typical inverse relationship between renewable supply, noted by the green line, and gas supply, noted by the orange line, for at least half of the year. Managed EV charging programs can shift and shape load beyond the evening ramp and peak, and include alignment with lower grid emission hours and also AVA's procurement costs. Next slide. And the last reason why we really need managed EV charging, because of all the EVs that are not only on the road today, but are going to be on the road tomorrow. With rising year-over-year growth, there are currently 114,000 EVs domiciled in Alameda and San Joaquin counties. Next slide. And despite a recent portrayal in the media of the EV market on the decline, 2024 has shown a mere 2% reduction in EVs as a percent of all new vehicle sales in our 2-county service area, which according to the DOE ranks in the top 5 nationally for EV adoption. To put this all into perspective, roughly 2 EVs in their charging is equivalent to the annual electricity usage of 1 residential customer, while 80% of the charging happens at home. With a fast rise in EVs, AVA needs to be actively managing this EV charging load in our program tied to our virtual power plant, while also delivering more value to our customers. Next slide. Okay. So here's an overview of our recommended program. You know, as I mentioned before with our managed charging pilot, not much is different going from that pilot, the structural pilot, to what would be a larger program. Our goal in this program is to actively manage, shift, and shape daily load of our EV customers. And it's a pretty easy program to participate in. 3 easy steps. A customer would fill out a brief form to verify that they're an AVA customer, which would be the target group for this program. They would enroll their eligible EV or home charger. And then once enrolled, they would set their program preferences. By participating, customers get their desired state of charge when they need it, and they can also boost their charging if they ever need to opt out of managed charging for a day. And then the next day, they're automatically defaulted back into their standard managed charging settings. This program would be proposed to launch in the fall, and the budget of $2.3 million was already approved from the fiscal year 23-24 budget. So we're coming in right on the tail end of the fiscal year and getting this program to the board. By participating in the program, participants would get an enrollment incentive and ongoing performance-based incentives as well. The enrollment goals here are 5,000 in year 1 and at least 2,000 or 10,000 by the end of year 2. Those minimum enrollment goals would make this one of the largest managed charging programs in the state of California. Yeah, so here are our program priorities for the first 2 years. This, as mentioned, you know, we have 114,000 EVs domiciled currently in our service area, and AVA just rebranded. This program is focused on daily load management. So a program like this is in the sort of eyes and ears of our EV customers once enrolled. And it also provides an opportunity for us to engage those customers on other opportunities, like nudging them to use our upcoming DC fast charging network. We want to enroll, again, at least 10,000 of our customers into this program and optimize around not only lower cost TOU periods, but also lower carbon hours without disrupting their needed charge to drive their vehicles. We want to focus on the daily load shifting out of the peak, but we could also focus on, and working with our power resources team, reducing our procurement costs by modulating when those EVs are shifting, not only out of the peak, but in certain times where our procurement costs might be lower. We also want to reduce our customers' energy costs. OptiWatt, our selected vendor, estimates that customers would save on average $288 per EV per year on a managed charging program like this if they're simply currently just charging right when they plug in their vehicle, which is quite common. For those that are maybe more rudimentarily already scheduling their vehicle's charging with current app features, they could still save on average $44 per EV per year. This program would also reduce greenhouse gases, which I'll talk about in 1 second, and on sort of flex alert days would provide some good resiliency by not only shifting charging load, but also reducing it. And then the last point is we really want to be earning revenue to reinvest back into our electric transportation programs. This program would qualify for the low carbon fuel standard market, which is a zero emission transportation credit market that is incentivizing programs like this to invest in zero emission transportation, putting those credits onto the market, and the revenue generated from selling those credits can be reinvested back into programs like this for customer incentives. Next slide. So the solicitation details and why we chose OptiWatt. As mentioned, this program was a part of the November 2023 RFP for our DERMS solicitation. In the solicitation, respondents were allowed to propose with a team or on their own. We received 3 unique bids, and listed here are the generally how we evaluated those responses. Our recommendation is to select Optiwatt as AVA's managed charging provider, and I'll share a few reasons why. One, they have existing and wide customer experience. They have 70,000 EVs alone already on their platform, and they have an enrollment option that's not only app-based, but also on the website. Their existing work also includes, they've already have over 1,200 EVs on their platform that are in our service area. So on day one, we would get an immediate boost of enrollments. Optiwatt, while they proposed, submitted as a sort of a loan bid, they also had a paired proposal with Lunar Energy, who is, as a reminder, is our preferred DERMS provider that we are contracting with. And so we are going to be able to contract with both of those vendors under one contract, which streamlines a lot of the operational processes. Well, also that contract would allow us to maintain direct oversight of Optiwatt's work. Another value that they bring is that AVA will be able to retain 100% of the value of the low carbon fuel standard credits that are generated in this program, which again, we can pass along as customer incentives and benefits. Yeah, and so again, the contract term here is $2.3 million. It's for 2 years with an option to extend for 3 one-year extensions, similar to the same structure as our DERMS contract with Lunar Energy. Next slide. So the program is developed here up to or at least 10,000 EVs enrolled by the end of year 2 is a large program. Again, it would be the largest in the state of California. But to really get to scale in an amount that matters to procurement and reducing our procurement costs, we really need to go bigger. And so this is seeding the opportunity for future years for us to scale up. And you know, fingers crossed and all hopes, maybe we'll come back earlier than that 2 years to ask for a budget increase. But these are just some key ingredients to not only why we selected Optiwatt, but some of the conditions that will be necessary for us to scale this program. And I'll just sort of go over a couple of them. I already talked about the size and the growth of the EV market in our service area. One of the things that Optiwatt provides on the 4th bullet is experience doing what's called omni-channel marketing. So they do a lot of marketing in many different avenues, including over 50 ways to engage a customer. And on average, it takes about 7 times to reach a customer before they sign up for a program. And so if you're only focusing on a few select channels, you're really not going to get to scale. And so they've been proven to do this at scale in programs that don't even have incentives, just open market. They're also developing point of sale relationships with OEMs and EV charging installers. The closer that you get to the point where the transaction is happening with an electric vehicle or a charger, the more likely someone is going to sign up for that program. And again, they are a recipient of the CEC Redwoods grant, which comes with additional funding that they can turn into our program. Next slide. This is an example of how this program can not only be optimized for TOU and cost reductions, but also emissions reductions. So Optiwatt, one of their options on the program, and again, this will be an AVA branded app. This is just sort of a current template from their open market work. They have a Save the Planet mode, which can be used in conjunction with cost savings. When a customer selects this mode, it integrates real-time localized grid emissions forecasting and signals from their partner WattTime. And so the charging can be modulated based on the actual grid emissions at the hour of charging. And through their work to date in California, Customers who have selected this option compared to those who have not have reduced their EV charging emissions by 40 to 60%. Next slide. And just one thing to note on this program, it is quite data intensive. You might have imagined that by just me talking. Whether it's marketing, enrollment, or daily charging management, it will require a lot of data to make sure this program is successful and also that we are validating the success of this program. AVA and our vendors prioritize data security and privacy. And I'm just wanting to go over some of these key points. First, OptiWatt has a SOC 2, is SOC 2 compliant, which is a market standard for compliance and evaluation for organizations' information security that relates to controls, policy, risk management, and scenario planning. The last one being what happens if there's a hack or et cetera. OptiWatt is compliant and is audited every 6 months as indicated by the SOC 2 Type 2 standard. OptiWatt uses what's called secure file transfer protocols to encrypt files when they're sent between them and a client like AVA. The data within those files is encrypted when it's transferred and also when it is held. They only provide as needed permissions-based views of the data to their staff. Fourth one is that AVA and OptiWatt are exchanging only the minimal amount of data to validate a customer to participate in the program and also to measure the impact of the program. Any personally identifiable information or PII that AVA provides to OptiWatt, that customer will have opted in for AVA to provide that to OptiWatt. And the last one is that when PII is used for marketing purposes, AVA and OptiWatt are only using what's called hash data. In that process, data is turned from simple data fields like an email address into an indecipherable code within a protected file that is only accessed to those that we've given a key. So we've taken pretty meaningful steps and updated our own AVA data policy to make sure that not only this program, but other programs that we manage that are like this are meeting and beating the market standards. So that is all for now, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. We'll take member clarifying comments. We'll go down to member DePenco.
Thank you, Rep, for the great presentation. It's an exciting program. I have a couple of different questions. Well, one, I did attend a conference earlier this year where OptiWatt was used during a pilot in Alberta, Canada, and saw very similar charts to what you showed. I was curious, so a lot of the vehicles now have, you know, their own kind of robust apps, and then a lot of folks have installed home chargers that have at least some level of management as well. And there's still kind of dumb chargers out there, but you know, this adds another layer of control to when you charge and how you charge. I'm just curious, you know, have you found with the people who participated in the pilot that there was, I don't know, just like frustration in all the different ways to control charging and which should I default to? And then the other kind of part of that is because a lot of the chargers that are being sold now at the residential level do have the ability to control time of use. And I was looking at the JuiceBox recently. They have this, you know, JuiceBox Green option where you can also sign up for that for an additional $50 to be able to charge at the lowest GHG electricity. So, you know, there seems to be some redundancy in the market depending on if you're controlling at the vehicle level versus the charger level. So that's kind of one piece, and then I can bring my other questions and comments after.
Sounds good. So I think there's two pieces about this. One is related to the virtual power plant. The other is related to managed charging.
Right.
So to address your first two questions, pilot frustration, yes, when some customers look at this, they ask, why is this any different than, you know, this vehicle app or that charger app? And there are some meaningful differences. Most of those apps don't allow you to schedule down to the nuance that we're talking about. So most of those apps, you know, you'll set a ready by time. what program that we're proposing, and the way it's set up, you can set your ready by time on a daily basis, which, as a lot of us know, our schedules change
Right.
Day to day in a week rather than day to day just generally. And then it also integrates a lot of other key functions, like it's not only about rate optimization, it's also about the greenhouse gas emissions optimization. And then eventually this has an incentive component, not only enrollment, but ongoing and performance-based. You know, your standard, let's just say Tesla app is not going to give you incentives to do this. But there is a lot of frustration, I think, on like just too many apps. It is something at the agency that we're sort of talking about. How can we sort of solve this customer challenge? Because it is a challenge. I would say that for programs like this, large auto manufacturers want to work with fewer parties. So if we're looking at trying to get a large automaker to partner with us on this program, it's not going to be through 10 to 15 charging companies. It's going to be through a single optimized app experience.
Right.
And eventually, I think the North Star is that we actually have those this program optimized into potentially an automaker's app within our service area. But automakers right now are still sort of scratching their head onto how to get into this work. And for most programs, whether it's a CCA or investor in utility, these programs are quite popular. And then, yeah, in terms of control, I don't know how the Juicebox program works and
Right.
and how they're
That was just
optimizing.
an example, but yeah,
Yeah.
it seems like there's a lot of chargers out there that
Yeah,
are
and I
doing
think
that.
kind of the relationship to that is with our BPP. So there's still a lot of value for a lot of, let's say you have a juice box at home and you don't want to sign up to our program, quite fine. You won't get the incentives or the other benefits, but you want to keep it simple. Juicebox or other providers could still participate in our virtual power plan. They would enroll as aggregators and work with Lunar Energy. So just because we're working with OptiWatt for managed charging for this program doesn't exclude other people in the electric transportation space from participating in our virtual power plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I had some other questions too. I don't know if we want to hit other people first. We'll come back to me.
Before it, just to kind of.
Okay, so high level, I was wondering if you achieve the numbers in the first 2 years of the program, do you have an estimate of the GHG emission reductions, either, you know, per participant or territory wide? And then the other was, you mentioned being able to generate LCFS revenue. Do you have an estimate of how much you'd be able to pull in for that?
Yeah, I do not have an estimate for the GHG emissions, but we can make an estimate and come back. I do have an LCFS revenue estimate, but I don't have it with me right now,
Okay.
but I'll pull it up.
Or do you know, like, proportionately how much the revenue is compared to the cost of administering the program?
Yeah, so if we're looking at the program as it's designed right now, I don't want to spitball, but
Okay.
I do have that number and I'll pull it up and get it to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what were the rewards or incentives to the customers for participating beyond just the energy savings that they're going to be getting?
So there's the enrollment incentive is provided. We haven't landed on an exact figure, but they would get that after their first successful charging session. And then there would be
Is
likely
that a bill credit or is that a separate?
currently it's structured in the contract as being a direct financial incentive, so like through PayPal or Venmo,
Okay.
and then a quarterly performance-based incentive.
Mhm.
Another thing we're also looking at is, you know, is there a way to move this incentive to be on bill or
Right.
maybe in other ways that loop back to AVA's programs, like maybe our DC fast charging network.
Okay, thank you.
Minutes? You had a question?
Couple questions related to why is this being subcontracted with Lunar Energy? And is there any intention of ever bringing these sorts of programs in-house where they'd be, you know, run by AVA employees and all?
Yeah, well, it's subcontract under Lunar Energy for contracting simplicity. Any distributed energy resource aggregator like Optiwatt is going to have to work through, like all the EVs and chargers that they're aggregating are going through our virtual power plant that Lunar Energy is working with, and they have an existing integration. So they proposed it as a package solution, and it saves on some ongoing contracting and.
Okay.
And then, is there any interest in bringing any of this in-house? Don't think we have an answer to that right now. Yeah.
I think the answer is no. We're not going to bring in the full development of an app plus all the integrations with every vehicle charger and all the level 2 chargers, like all the APIs, and that's an infrastructure that is meant to build to scale much larger than Ava's territory. So
Okay,
it
that
doesn't
makes
make
sense.
sense to build all that ourselves. That's why we contract with a vendor for that.
How many, and then another sort of questions on the numbers. How many EV chargers were enrolled in the pilot program?
Yeah, it was a pretty small sample. It was 102.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then is there do they get any bonus or incentive if they meet their targets early or if they exceed their targets significantly? Do they get?
Good question. I think personally, I am more concerned that they don't meet their targets. Optiwatt has proven that they can.
Yeah.
Managed charging providers sort of across the state have had lofty goals, and I would say many of them have not reached those lofty goals. We feel pretty confident that a minimum of 5,000 and 10,000 can be hit in years 1 and 2. And I think the incentive there is that, if they're hitting their goals, we have listed in the contract that we would be seeking to get a higher NTE from the board based on not just hitting the goals, but performance. Also, as a risk mitigation factor in the contract, we have penalties if they don't hit those minimums by the end of year 1 and by the end of year 2 to sort of encourage and help us meet those proof points of scale that are going to be necessary for a program like this.
And a couple other more on the technical questions. Is there the capability to take advantage of bidirectional charging when that hardware gets into the cars?
Yeah, so I would say vehicle to grid bidirectional charging has it felt a lot of experts said it was coming soon when I started doing electric transportation work 6 years ago, and it's still coming soon, as I always hear that. And there are some really important pilots going on with automakers, utilities, but it's something that hasn't been proven outside of a lab, hasn't been proven in sort of the consumer market, and it's definitely a possibility, yes, but
it's not like
it's
an option that's in the contract that.
No, I personally do not think it's not going to be in the market in the next 2 years.
Okay.
But we could always amend the contract to include some other incentive opportunities in our virtual power plant in this program if it did. But we're not going to be expecting it contractually.
Right. Okay, next, although it sounds like you're open to it. You're open to it if it shows up.
Oh,
and you can.
yeah. We're open to it, and it's providing real customer value.
Yeah. The other question I have, one of your slides, you showed how the target is the daytime, but you didn't, in the pilot, you weren't able to take advantage.
We did not focus. The pilot was explicitly focused on looking at peak load shifting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that going to be part of this?
It will be part of this program. Yeah.
For ones that are plugged in at home.
Yeah, so the way that can work, for example, this has been the case with Silicon Valley Clean Energy and MCE's programs, where, and will be the case for ours, a customer's ready by time sort of signals to us and OptiWatt when, when you can actually use and use that flexible load. And so, you know, Ava is in the office Tuesday, Thursdays, but and then some Wednesdays. But let's say Monday and Friday, all of our staff, they're ready by time. It might be 5 p.m. when they actually are off of work. And so for days that we see customers that have their ready by time for later than, you know, let's say up to 3 p.m. when park peak starts, we're going to be soaking up as much renewable energy during the day as possible.
Is there and I don't know how the hardware works in the connection, but is there a way to somehow tie it to the car? So if it's in a parking lot at work or at school or retail during the day and the parking lot's in Ava territory, you can take advantage of it that way?
This is all focused on home charging. And part of that is kind of the way the program is designed and operated. If someone's away from home, there's not a lot of time to actually manage. You think about that flexible load. It's about average 12 hours when someone's sort of plugged in at home. It's much shorter when they're on the road, and actually the majority of the charging load is at home. Like I mentioned, on average is 80%. So we're really trying to focus on like, what is the largest lot? It gets very complicated when you try to look at charging outside of home. One thing that we are doing that's outside of homes, and it's in the contract, and once we get the residential EV charging program going, the contract does have options to enroll fleets into this program. So we can work with a local business or cities with an EV fleet, and we can manage their load into this program.
I think as an EV driver, like if you go somewhere and you go to a charge point or a level 2 in a garage and you pay for it because you're going to go somewhere, you are making an active decision. I need to charge right now. And so we wouldn't necessarily want to just get in between that and say, oh, no, you don't want to charge right now.
I was thinking about large employers that offer charging at work.
Yeah, and I think in those instances, like even in our own building, there's usually caps on how long you can stay idled in a place, and they're wanting to turn those over as fast as possible. And so we're really focused on home charging because that's where there's like private, flexible load.
Yeah. I'm just thinking,
Oh, no, yeah, it's a good idea, but yeah, I think.
I can sign on to this at work and you can connect up that way, it seems like.
Yeah, I think in those instances, again, like JP mentioned, folks are looking for the fastest, quickest charge because typically you're actively paying for that time.
Thank you. We're going online to member Stevenson.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I had some questions. I'm familiar a little bit with OptiWatt, and I had three questions, so I can break them up so you can respond if that's all right, or whatever works best for you. Anyway, I drive an EV. I have an older Chevy Bolt. It looks like OptiWatt requires like an active My Chevrolet subscription, at least for the Bolt, and that costs like $20 a month, and is independent of everything else here. So as speaking personally, I don't really see any benefit to that, being that I would be paying a substantial amount of money to get something my car already does. That's not really a question, that's a statement. Number two here. So as far as I know, all EVs already allow users to schedule, a charging window to match with off-peak rates using either an app or the on-car interface. It seems like we're essentially achieving the same result with more staff. Why don't we just encourage customers to schedule charging themselves?
Do you have any others? I've been writing down.
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. And the third one is, maybe I misheard, but it sounded like during the pilot program, it started from a substantial number of customers that did not respond to price-only signals to encourage them to charge during off-peak times. but by using this app, then they did respond to that. Is that understanding correct? And if so, I mean, why was that? I ask simply because the difference between off-peak, part peak, and peak rates on EV2A are really substantial. So you would think that they would be motivated to charge during the cheaper off-peak times.
Yeah, so a few responses. So to your comment about Chevy not, having a difficult integration, there are some automakers that don't integrate well, and so Chevy is one example where they do require the sort of My Chevy or OnStar to be activated, and there are some automakers that are trying to go their own way. Ford just announced a couple months ago that they're sort of closing their Open Telematics, which is the software that allows this kind of activity to happen, to maybe do their own program. When we do sign the contract, you'll be able to see sort of the number of automakers, and Optiwatt has the largest total addressable market in our service area of EVs and chargers that can participate. But yes, it won't work for everyone, but it will work for almost everyone. On the second point of what's the sort of beneficial difference of using an existing automaker's app to schedule your charging versus what we're proposing, there's sort of a few things. One is incentives. So customers are getting active incentives to participate in this program. The second is that this is integrated with not just TOU rates, but also with GHG reductions, and then also potentially other things like, for example, AVA's procurement costs or CAISO Flex alerts. The third thing is that even within a TOU period, there are times where it is better to charge and when it is not. So an example, and this kind of gets into your last question around pilot response, there are a fair number of EV drivers that are on an EV2 rate, and they schedule their car to charge at midnight because that's the start of off-peak charging. But when all of our EV drivers do that, it creates an incidental timer peak. So if our peak period now is 4 to 9 p.m., pretty soon it might be midnight to 3 a.m. because we have all of these EVs coming online at the exact same time. As a load-serving entity, we really need to avoid peaky periods. So a program like this actually allows us to shave and shape those peaks and smooth them out. So it's more of like the rolling hills of Livermore than the high Sierras. And that's a really important sort of component of this kind of program from a load-serving entity standpoint. And it doesn't change the customer experience at all. And then I think your last question, I think I just answered that, but why is it that some are and some are not? Some people are not price sensitive. Those folks do not care about saving $280 a year or $44 a year. I was at MCE for 5 years before joining AVA a year and a half ago, and I managed a managed charging pilot there for a couple of years and a scaled up program. And what we found is that a large share of our EV drivers didn't actually care about that. They actually cared about the GHG savings. They really wanted to know that their charging was helping the planet. And so those customers were really optimized for daytime charging. They didn't really care about, those off-peak times. And in fact, some customers are scheduling and using their in-app or in-car features to schedule, say, right at that midnight. And again, a lot of them aren't. In our pilot, for example, 60% of all charging sessions started between 6 and 9 p.m. So again, most of those folks all those participants were on a TOU rate. So they were starting their charging without managed charging kind of right in that window.
Fantastic. Thank you. That answers my question.
Okay. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you. Member Swaminathan.
Yes, hi, Brett. I have a quick question. When you did the RFP, was it for the VPP the DERMS provider or a managed service, EV charging managed service provider? How did you end up with both? And is this your first of the BPP programs?
Yeah, great question. So in our solicitation, it was structured so that vendors could propose as a team or to specific scopes. So managed charging, just in that instance, is scope 3. The virtual power plant team and myself and those that were reviewing the managed charging proposals sort of created a firewall. We reviewed the virtual power plant proposals on their own and the managed charging proposals on their own. And then when we were all finished with our reviews, we sort of looked to see where was their alignment and overlap. And sort of as it stood, Lunar Energy was our top-rated DERMS proposal, and Optiwatt was our top-rated managed charging proposal. Each of them had their own standalone bids, but they actually also did submit a joint proposal. And so when it came down to it, sort of we got what we wanted. And there were other vendors and parties that did the same thing, but even when we sort of firewalled them off, none of them overlapped, and those two did as our top. So in the instance where that didn't happen, where let's say our top DERMS or managed charging provider, they didn't have a joint proposal, we would have contracted with them separately. But this is where we landed.
All right, very good. Best wishes.
Yeah, thank you.
We have a question down there. Remember Vice Chair Souza?
Real quick. I assume that this, I have like 3 EV cars so, in my family. So.
Okay, great. Hopefully you can enroll in the program.
Okay, then I this was my question. Can you do that? This second one is a little more complicated, and this is just about rates. I brought it up a while ago, but so this is a rate plan that's optimized for car charging or people with EVs. What about people who are electrifying their homes and they're moving away from gas? There are people who there's plans for electric heat. There's plans for solar. How do these things, are they looking to integrate any of these?
Yes. So this is where our virtual power plant comes into play. And this is also why we, as an agency, we led with our virtual power plant, and then we followed up with managed charging, and we will follow up with other programs. So our virtual power plant will be sort of a controllable asset of all of our distributed energy resources: batteries, heat pump hot water heaters, thermostats, EVs. If you can electrify it and you can manage it, it'll be part of our virtual power plant, and it will be integrated.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome.
So I'm not seeing any more member comments. I think we have to go to public comment if there is anything.
There are no hands raised at this time.
Great. With that, I can take a motion to accept the staff recommendation. It's information though.
It's on the consent calendar. There will be a vote.
So we'll recommend it?
Yeah.
All right. Member Lutz,
I'll second.
Member DeFranco, second. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Great, thank you. Member Landry.
Yes.
Member Stevenson.
Yes.
Member Swaminathan.
Yes.
Member Lakshman. Member Lakshman.
Yes. Yes.
Member DeFranco.
Yes.
Member Carr. Member Carr. I'm back to Member Carr. Member Lutz.
Yes.
Vice Chair Souza.
Yes.
Chair Hernandez.
Yes, very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you.
All good?
Yes.
All right, perfect. We'll go to the next and final item. The heat pump incentive for $1 million. Is that right, Dan?
Yes. Thank you, Chair Hernandez and members of the CAC. My name is Dan Bertoldi, Electrification Program Manager here at AVA, and I'm going to provide an update on our recommendations to the board to approve additional funding for the Bay Area Regional Heat Pump Water Heater Contractor Incentive Program. This program is administered by Stop Waste. We've been partnering with them since 2020, along with other regional CCAs that are also party to the cooperative agreement. We are recommending an additional $1 million, which would make a total contribution of approximately $1.7 million towards this program over the full term of the agreement. It is a midstream program, which would allow for licensed contractors in the area to receive $1,000 for each heat pump water heater that they install for AVA customers. The $1 million is projected to provide 880 heat pump water heater installs, should the program be fully subscribed. Since we've been working with Stop Waste on this program, it has helped fund 550 heat pump water heaters across AVA's service area. So we're looking to more than double that number over the next 9 months. The addition of this funding comes at a critical time. Right now, the state's tech program is on pause for all residential heat pump water heater incentives in PG&E service territory. And this pause will continue until the state approves the next phase of that program. And I will note that the agreement that we're going to be providing funding to ends in March of 2025. And so next steps after this program end are still to be determined. We're going to explore options, particularly to address heat pump water heater incentives for income qualified customers in future efforts. But with that, that concludes my update, short and sweet, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I believe this is an informational item, so we'll take any questions or no?
It's on the consent calendar as well.
Oh, that's right. Oh, there it is. Very small. Thank you. Yes, here and there.
Thank you. So as of June 3rd, 2024, was the last day to make sales and create claims, reserves on Tech Clean. Is this gonna rejuvenate this, or how's this happening? Is it gonna rejuvenate this year, or will it be next year for Tech Clean?
Well, I think you know, this will help kind of keep the momentum up that Tech has generated. I can't say that this will you know, rejuvenate Tech, because that is a a statewide program, but for our customers, it'll certainly help. I don't have the timeline right now that the Tech program will come back. I know that they've made recommendations to the PUC, and so we're going to wait and see what that modified program looks like and when that funding will come back.
Thank you so much. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there. It's Tech Clean that ran out of money, not us.
Well,
Thank you.
we had previously funded heat pump water heater incentives and then allowed them to phase out when Tech came on. And so then there's been a gap. And now that Tech has run out of money, we're stepping back in to provide incentives. So,
So it's outside of Tech.
it's outside of Tech.
Oh, my
This is an
bad.
individual program specifically to Stop Waste, but similar category of heat pump water heaters, but we're not funding Tech. We're funding Stop Waste.
Oh, very good. I'm sorry about that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Excellent.
Maybe let's.
Actually, I had a question on that because I saw BayREN that AVA ran out on November 6, 2023. I guess that was when Tech Clean California came back on, or about that time.
I think there were two different things. I'm very familiar with BayREN. And BayREN is moving towards the shell, the building shell, and then sending that, the insulation, air sealing.
Right, but they do have a website about heat pump water heater incentives. And there's multiple incentives that vary depending on where you are and who you are. One question is that you're going to address incentives for heat pump water heaters for low-income customers through other efforts. And then sort of related, but this is $1,000 per heat pump water heater to the contractor. Some of the other CCAs are giving more. And again, from Bayren, it's PCE is giving $3,000 and Silicon Valley is giving $2,000. And in both of those cases, they're giving $1,000. I'm guessing it's extra for care customers. So is there why did you pick those numbers? And why didn't you do a spiff for care customers like other CCAs did?
Thank you for that question. So, well, I'll address the second question first. So, because we have signed on to a cooperative agreement with other CCAs for this program through Stop Waste, we kind of have to conform to the rules of the cooperative agreement, unless all of the other parties to the agreement kind of go along with the same incentive. So, we're effectively refunding this program that was already set up. If we did want to change, it would require all the other parties to change. We would also have to reconfigure the way that the program is administered with the system that's being used, and that would take some time. And because this agreement is set to end fairly soon, it makes sense to kind of continue with what we had previously done. To address your previous question on the amount, I think with the funding that we have, and the projections that we've seen from Stop Waste, we're confident that this is enough to fund us through March 2025 if we expanded that amount, that the money would go to less customers. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we kept it at 1,000 at this time. And if JP would like to provide any further insight.
Yeah. Similarly, all the other CCAs that are going through Stop Waste are all at $1,000. So it's a standard program across multiple CCAs. I think there are a couple other CCAs that have kind of spiffs through their own systems, but through Stop Waste, it's uniform. And so in order to kind of get money out into the community quickly, we opted to not go through a renegotiation process on the agreement and try to restructure the program, especially considering it's, as Dan said, the overall program terminates in March of 25. So if we spent the next 3 to 4 months doing that, then that's just 3 to 4 months less of incentives.
Okay. And the other sort of a longer term question, probably more for Brett, is are you keeping track of these water heaters so they can roll in the controlled heat pump water heater guys programs that
Yeah, we have
rolling out
name,
soon?
contact information, make and model of every heat pump hot water heater we've given an incentive to. So we know where they are and we know what models they are so that we can look to enroll them in a program once we make it available.
Okay. And then I assume you're thinking about that behind the office.
We are, but EVs and solar and storage are two big fish, so we're going to try to catch those first before we go after heat pump hot water heaters.
I had a hand up, Member Landry.
I would like to move the staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Do we have any public comment?
There are no hands raised.
Great. So we have a first and a second. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Great. The first by Landry, the second by Luce. Great. Thank you. Member Landry.
Yes.
Member Stevenson.
Yes.
Member Swarminathon,
Yes.
Member Lockman,
Yes.
Member DeFranco,
Yes.
Member Carr,
Yes.
Member Lutz,
Yes.
Vice Chair Souza,
Yes.
and Chair Hernandez.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. We'll move over to CAC member and staff announcements, including requests to place items on future CAC agendas. Any staff announcements first? No? Okay, members.
Not an announcement, but a request. I'd like to request additional CAC meetings to host workshops and study sessions to collect information from the community and experts on relevant topics, to help provide advice to the board on subjects such as community resilience hubs or the status of net billing tariffs. There's lots of topics that could be covered. With proposing that these be no decisions taken or proposals voted on, but board members and CAC members can ask questions, and staff and AVA staff can ask questions, so it'd be more study sessions. And I propose the first Monday of the month, first Monday evening, so it's equivalent to this, but 2 weeks away, pending the holidays.
Just to recap, you're asking a monthly or ad hoc session, like a town hall conversation about items that are of interest?
More than just a town hall, that we would invite experts or community members that we know are knowledgeable and have information about it, the topics. And when I was writing this up, resiliency hubs is an obvious one. Since the board's interested in the study session, it seems like we could host it. There's all sorts of other ones. One of our members was asking about private directional EV charging.
We would just have to post that? Would we have to make it public? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm talking an official meeting, but not with any decisions or recommendations to be made, but posted with agendas and speakers and lots of time for questions.
I would be very happy to see something like that, but not necessarily once a month, but maybe just have a wish list of things to discuss and then just get through them. Maybe, given maybe every couple months, or maybe not, like you said, ad hoc.
Okay, I'm just trying to visualize how we would organize the session, if it's through something member supported or driven, is it board supported, is there staff support, or is it more on us to organize these info sessions?
I haven't
Okay.
I have no recommendations.
I think
on that.
we should probably explore
If
that.
it's official, though, I would expect some staff support, hardware and stuff, so that it gets recorded in the record.
And I think probably would have to be board supported, I would think, and give a recommendation to the board that we'd like to host or see these kind of community forums, expressing more information around resiliency hubs and activities. It's something I can bring forth on Wednesday. If you have more information, I think that's helpful. But yeah, I think I have a gist of it. It would just be more informational sessions, like resiliency hubs. I think board member Calb asked for more of around resiliency hubs and have that kind of forum and discussion. So those study sessions, I think it's just opening up to a bigger community information session. I think you mentioned that at the last meeting, or they were in the notes. Remember Calb? Okay, no, understood. vouch too. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think there were both of them in the notes. Okay.
I know they want it.
Oh, yes, I think it's probably gonna happen. Just depends when, where, how. So all those details. Okay.
I would suggest, considering if we're talking about like, you really want to dive deep around resiliency hubs, maybe that's something that, AVA staff could look into doing a community meeting around where board members and CAC members could attend, rather than it being a publicly noticed meeting in the evening, just because I know that there's a lot of demands on everybody's time, especially when it comes to evening meetings. I don't know if that's something that's possible. I mean, I know there's also a lot of workshops and meetings around, all these topics happening. Being a former staff member in the city of Fremont, there was always stuff that we could participate in at the staff level, and then there were things that council members were participating in. So I'm just concerned about the amount of meetings that you're asking people to attend and the overload of information. So then, really the question is there a purpose out of these ad hoc meetings that you're requesting that would be publicly noticed, or if it's really informational for the community to really kind of just get input and garner excitement, then that's a different purpose that I think could be more public.
Well, I think that there are several things that have, there's a repetition of many items, including the the new tariff, NBT tariffs, the resiliency hubs, all of those things which come up every meeting.
Yeah.
They seem that there is some movement in it, but they're buried in programs, and we don't really see that movement as clearly as we'd like to. And it seems like we're talked to a lot rather than coming up with maybe some solutions that, we're aware of things that others aren't, and vice versa. So, I mean, I really feel that if we could find a way to have our own little thing where we can kind of all come to a same place and level the playing field, so we can all come from the same place and say, okay, this is doable, or this is not doable, or I'm not saying that, we're coming to decisions, but we're just trying to figure out where to put our efforts. It just seems like we're hearing the same thing, over and over, and I'd really like to see some resolution. Does that make sense?
Yeah, if I may, we have heard the same thing, and we've also brought to the board and this committee, a plan for $30 million in solar and storage incentives, community innovation grants for, resilience hub work, and technical assistance in the form of $2 million worth of technical assistance for resilience hubs. So maybe there's a different way we need to be framing it so that we can show what we're doing.
Yes.
But we've also made those presentations at 3 or 4 different meetings, executive comm, board, and the CAC. So we can bring it back again. But we've been working on this.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I really feel that you guys have done a lot in terms of the responsive. I kind of want to put some stuff together. Real progress. And you guys have been making progress.
I think we're hearing a little bit about take the show on the road. Maybe not something here, but I know you also show and present at various venues and you're present in tabling. So that maybe it's another element of not being in this environment, but being more out where the community's at. So maybe just being able to see what that looks like, and maybe there's an opportunity to partner with other community benefit organizations to present the data in those forums, and then we can attend those events as guests versus presented to. I think I'm sort of understanding how it flips. That somehow, but we'll keep exploring it, I think, as we refine this idea, and we can talk more offline and present it further to get more support. Thank you. Other comments, questions? Members? On and off? All right, with that, thank you very much, members, staff, and friends in the back. We're gonna adjourn to Monday, July 15th at 6 o'clock, here in the same room. Until then, have a good night.
Good night.
There we go, that's better.
Thank you.
Good night.